Hello, people, persons, little kitty cats. You're here with Mr. Thinky Talky McTalkface himself. I'm home from work today because I don't know. I have some really bad illness, and so I'll probably be coughing and hacking and snorting, and I will try to keep that to a minimum. But I can talk to you this way without you becoming ill because we're virtually not alone. There's a lot of things I want to talk about. This is essentially this is an addendum. Okay, a lot of echo. Thank you for that. I will try to fix that. Let me see. Okay, is it better now? Because maybe I have to leave the studio and come back or redo my mic or something. Maybe I should just start this over. I don't think I can. Not yet, dang it. Okay. How to do this? If I leave studio, does it just end the stream? That would be annoying because I put a lot of it. What if I just unplug my mic? Why is that so weird that would work? I mean, I'm sure it picks up the audio now, but it's not good. Thanks, Jer, by the way. Send the link. I have a bunch of stuff I have to say first. That's how I do these things. So I'll just try it like this. I don't know. Is the audio better? So I want to go through. Oh, I see what you're saying. This is so terrible because this is like, we're all good. Okay, Jeremy's here. Whatever. The audio's not as great as if my mic is working, but whatever. Okay. Sorry, people. I'm going to go through my list that I put in the description, the show notes. Thanks, Tim. And then I'm really excited too because I found this clip. Why was I reminded about this clip as I was trying to put all the links into this conversation? Oh yeah, because one of my addendum points here. So let's go through the addendum points. And oh, maybe the audio was on. Hey, Logos, maybe the audio was on your thing. Did you have YouTube open? Multiple places? I don't know. Whatever. We're just doing it this way. Forget it. Sorry. So the addendum for my personalism videos, because this is a point I've been trying to make for a really, really long time about my personalist knowing versus like a definitional understanding or versus a literal understanding versus a articulable propositional understanding. It's essentially 1 Corinthians 8, knowing as you are known. It is the anti, like Sherry made that Descartes cogito joke in or cogito joke in the end of one of the live streams. And it was funny because it was just like, it was a play on I think, therefore I am, obviously. And it was just like, I don't think so. Or it said, I don't think. Something was like, I don't think. And then he ceased to exist. It's a, and it's very Peter Rollins, that our knowing is, and very much like this clip from this Cormac McCarthy interview that I love, where he talks about our unknowing being larger than, or its right brain encompassing our known and our articulable stuff. Michael Polanyi, all that stuff. If I plug this back in, will it just work? I want the audio to be better. If my audio all of a sudden gets crappy, let me know. And then I'm going to read through this list. Okay. Is the audio still good? Okay. So the addendum, it's fine. Good. So one of the things that I want to talk about that I didn't talk about in my first live stream about personalism was and it was part of a conversation I had with some local friends here about what is the TLC, was, um, it was on, uh, how cultures and how the medium and the message are related. And it's very much tied to this Tyler Anderson thing, who's one of the early starters of the Bridges of Meaning with Joey, and was part of, and I don't know if he still participates with uh, PVK's initial Jordan Peterson meetup in Sacramento. But he talked about how the church, and I would say all healthy bodies, should be using masculine language with a feminine space, but most of them have been using feminine language in masculine spaces. And I think a lot of that has to do with differences between Peterson sphere stuff and what Mark and Father Eric were talking about. They want a lot more of a masculine space, I would say, and not necessarily masculine space and masculine language, probably, versus a feminine space, hospitality, welcoming, not harvesting the fringes, not harvesting the edges of the field, welcoming the sojourner and the outsider into your community, not having hard lines. That's a feminine space. But it's not true that a feminine space, because they were pushing back on me a little bit, it's not true that a feminine space will not exclude. It will not, but it's natural. It's emergent. It's a proper balance between emanation and emergence. And one of the ways you could illustrate that is like even in a forest, like a natural forest, and there'll be poison ivy or poison oak or something like that. And I learned this actually when I was on a foraging trip. But that one of the ways that foragers and more naturalist type people, that one of the names for poison ivy is they call it something. It's like a sister plant or something like that. So I can't remember the exact name, but essentially it's because one of the things that poison ivy does is it will naturally be in forests, and you'll see it sometimes, but like it's really, really uncommon. Where ivy starts to really manifest in a lot of ways is where human beings come in and do like clear cuttings, and they're like clear a field for like non-permaculture, non-integrated kind of farming practices. And then on the edge of forests, a lot of times it's almost like it's like a barrier. It's like a warning. Poison ivy will really grow along the edges of a cleared forest because it's almost like a guardian saying like, keep out, you're dangerous. I don't know, it's just so fascinating. Like you are hurting the thing, and it's like a barrier to keep people out. A feminine space would exclude someone for being exclusivist. Yeah, but not explicitly. I think it would just happen. Like this is what I was talking about in the first live stream, that ideologues I think come into TLC, but they just end up leaving because they can't convert everyone to their ideology because it just doesn't happen. They're not explicitly excluded in a kind of propositional confessional way. Okay, let's move on to the next point, which we can go into all this later when I open this up, because I do want to open this up. So I wrote, one must be willing to let the body die or to win by losing. And that's because you cannot control what you love. I think that's a huge part of any healthy body and TLC and parenting or anything else, is like you cannot, in the end, and Chad said this a little bit in his morning's live stream, are you willing to let something die to be right or to insist on your own way? Or are you willing to die for the sake of the larger body, the larger group, the larger cultural, that self-sacrificial thing? You know, they must increase and I must decrease, that kind of general motif. I think that is, healthy bodies are always not this inverted earthly hierarchy where the higher lords it over and takes advantage of the lower. The head manipulates and abuses the body, but it's where the higher serves the lower and sacrifices itself for the lower. All right. Another point is the assumptions. Oh, yeah. There's this question that happened when I was hanging out with my local buddies, and they would say, like, "What is this space?" or "Explain the TLC to me." And I think there's an implicit, a hidden assumption behind that thing is that something can be explained to you with definitions and words. It's this transactional one-to-one understanding of language and communication. It's like, if I give you enough words about something, you'll be able to understand it. And I think that's fundamentally a modernist thing. And I would say you cannot understand something without initiation. Um, Chad uses this illustration all the time, but it's very true. It's like taste and see. So, like, explain to me the taste of honey. I mean, you can try, and many people do, or the taste of a banana, but but you really can't. You can point to other things, and this is where memory comes in. Why I say memory is the purveyor of reason, but memory is also predicated on experience. You don't have a memory of something you haven't experienced or that you haven't participated in. And you can't even apply reason if you don't have the memory of something. And then, so like a banana, what does a banana taste like? Well, it's like a tropical fruit. Well, what if you've never eaten a tropical fruit? Uh, it's like a Belgian beer or something. It's like these certain higher ester notes within a Belgian beer because of Belgian yeasts. And what if somebody doesn't know what an ester is? It's just this infinite regress of fractal experience and participation. You can't explain something to someone who's never tasted honey. You know, you have to be initiated into something to understand it. And anything works this way. Science works this way, math works this way, baking works this way, parenting works this way. What's it like to raise a child? You cannot know without some degree of initiation within the morphic field of the resonance of that relationship. That's kind of the way that I would say it. And that thing is what made me think of this video that I put in. I was I went through the work of figuring out, because this is the best thing that Bethel McGrew has, in my opinion. It's, for me, it is the best thing Bethel McGrew has ever contributed to this little corner of the internet, is that she referenced this interview with, who even is the guy? It's in the show notes, with, I was just looking at it. Andrew Scott, and he's interviewing the director of this film. The film is called Seawall, and in it, and I still haven't seen the film. I need to just commit to watching the film because I'm sure it's really good and beautiful. Bethel talked about it, and but in it, I'm gonna play it. Actually, I might just go find it right now and play it because I was just listening to it, and I want to stream it. Okay, my last addendum is that proper naming, and this is something hopefully Chezi and I have talked a lot about naming, and hopefully he can jump on here because it's obviously central to all of reality, very much Judaism and Christianity, and I would think Islam as well, but anything, like, what's in a name? The name of the rose. Would a rose by any other name be any less sweet? Umberto Eco's book, The Name of the Rose. What is the name? This is very much that Eric Weinstein, the second conversation with Terrence Howard on Rogan and Eric Weinstein, and he made this little quip comment, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much in this. This is exactly what it's about. And Eric said something, he said basically like, Terrence, this is your problem, is you want to go directly to what things mean. We don't even know what things are. Yeah, you never know what things are. That's your problem. That would be Eric is brilliant and wonderful, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing. Eric said in that conversation also is that I really have to seek to understand someone because otherwise I'm going to be falsely criticizing a model of someone, which is a very Ian McGilchrist thing to say. All models are false, some are useful. You could have a model of someone that you're judging and critiquing, which I actually think whenever you are, that's what you're doing. Because I think ultimately we all really believe the same thing. There's a controversial thing. I think that just our experience of how we express those things throughout time is going to have lots of differences, but that's also part of our becoming. And I think a what's the way to say it? It's not a flaw. It's a benefit, not a flaw. I think that's intended, because that's part of our becoming. But okay, losing track here. Seawall, gonna play it. Oh, names, proper names. So I said proper names or real names are given. Emanation. But half of a gift is that it's received. The emergence. It is accepted voluntarily, willingly. That's a huge part of proper naming, I think. It is acknowledged as proper and correct and lived into the fullness of that reality. And I think ultimately that is the name that God, the Whitestone name, that God gives us at the end, that only He knows who we truly are. And in our own, perhaps in our own creation of ourselves, and our first act is learning to fully embody the Creator, the divine spark, the Christ in me. We in our becoming, we have created ourselves and discovered who we are, and that's our givenness and our name. And that simultaneous reciprocity happens when we are given our name at the fullness. Up. Thank you, buddy. Simon Stevens. All right. I'm going to go find that, and I want to play it because it's so awesome. And I think it starts at 5:48. So let's do this. I'm almost certain it's the very last one. It's number 6. So let's watch that first, because it's so good. I wanted to share this forever. And I am talking about it all the time, or I bring it up very often, but I've never gone through the work to go back and find it in a way with timestamps so that I can share it. And I want to just play it in here and watch it. And then I'm going to open this sucker up, because all of this stuff is a very important topic. And obviously I care about this little corner of the internet. So let's do this. Here we go. I'm certain. Is this right? Part 6, correct. Let's go back to, I found the timestamp. My internet's obviously lagging, which is dumb. Let's start at 5:50. Let's make this big.
So I was really fascinated. That's why one of the lines about the existence of God it's in the way the light falls over the city at the start, at the end of a day. That's because I knew we were playing it at the end of a day in a city. Yeah. So there's a lot. So I knew all that stuff, and I think that's why Alex is a photographer, is because I became fascinated by light and capturing light. But it was still too close. And then I got the email from you after you'd been to see my play Harper Regan at the National, and you were very enthusiastic about that.
Yeah, what an evening.
And then I just knew it was for you. It was going to be for Andrew Scott. And then I was no longer writing autobiography. I was imagining you.
Yeah, you can have this sort of,
It's that separation.
Yeah, it's sort of like a tension, isn't it?
Completely, really completely. And so my main physical memory of the writing it was, I'm a planner, when I'm writing, I'm a planner. I plan things really carefully. And this one, I knew there was going to be the dual technique.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
There's going to be 2 things going on. One of which was going to be, there's 3 things going on. Yeah, there's 3 things going on in the script. There's the gesture of Alex talking to his audience or his camera in the film is kind of present tense.
Yeah.
And then you've got 2 past tense narratives playing out.
Yeah.
One is the story of his marriage and of Lucy, and of Lucy's birth and death. And related to that is all the childhood reference. And then the other is his relationship with Arthur. And with that is a consideration of the existence or non-existence of God. And that became something that was really important to me. And at the time, and still, I would think of myself as being an atheist. I'm not quite as antitheist as I was once. At the time of writing this play, weirdly, I was really strongly antitheist, which is a word coined by Christopher Hitchens to describe not just atheism, but active opposition to religion. I was really like that. Yeah. And I'm less like that now. But weirdly in this play, I started off very much wanting to disprove the existence of God, and somehow found as a dramatist that the best way of doing that was to give the most powerful line in that argument to the Christian, effectively, to the
Yes,
religious
yeah.
person, when he finally, and I think when he finally answers where God is,
He's in the way some people move.
exactly, and the feeling of water and the
The
light.
space between two numbers.
Yeah. That all of a sudden I thought, fucking hell, I've convinced myself into the belief.
But I remember there's something that you said. I remember, but I can't remember. No, but isn't there something where somebody said to you about the existence of love?
Yes. Yeah.
What's that?
I had this conversation.
All right. I just want to pause it for now. I want to keep going to show his existence of love. I can't remember, but this is that part is the part that's just really stuck out to me. Let's go back and just listen to what he said again, because it's so good. Like, what a true. See, this person, he's true. He's an atheist, whatever. Like, I don't care, and he's writing that, but like, and he knows that from what he's saying, he gives the strongest line to the believer, even though he's into all this Hitchin, like Christopher Hitchens stuff, and like it's in. What's the first thing? Let's go back. Let's go find it. Okay, let's go back.
But I can't remember. No, but isn't there something where somebody said to you about the existence of love?
Yes.
No.
When he finally, and I think when he finally answers where God is,
He's in the way some people move.
exactly, and the feeling of water and the
The
light.
space between two numbers.
Yeah. That all of a sudden I thought, fucking hell, I've convinced myself.
Yeah, he's like, I've convinced myself of God. That thing. Where's God? It's in the way some people move, or the feeling of water, or the space between numbers, the taste of a banana, the taste of honey, the morning light. I mean, dang. All right, let's keep listening, and then I'll open this up. Here we go.
Self into the belief.
But I remember there's something that you said. I remember, but I can't remember. No, but isn't there something where somebody said to you about the existence of love?
Yes. Yeah.
What's that?
I had this conversation with a friend of mine, debating the existence or non-existence of God, and they said to me, well, do you believe in love? And I said, yes, I did. You know, as a husband and as a father of 3 children, it'd be kind of weird to not believe in love in a way. And she said, well, if you believe in love, that's an intangible abstraction. Why are you so dissatisfied with other people's belief in the intangible abstraction that is God?
Yeah.
You know, if you can believe in love, why can't you believe in God? The same levels of logic apply to both. So don't get so hung up about not believing in God if you do believe in love. And that, I think that really sits in this play.
It does. It does. And because it doesn't, it's not about organized religion. It's the theme is that it's not organized religion. It's just about.
It's something that informed all 3 of us. The person absent from this was absent from the film.
All right. I'm just going to, feel free to go back and watch the whole thing if you feel so inclined. It's really beautiful. That's been something that's really, really, really stuck with me. Like the feel of water, the way someone moves. Man, what beautiful poetic ways to describe the ineffable. Do you understand any of that without initiation? Can you describe, like, if you have an experience of a beautiful dancer, or the way that a book moved you, or the way that a certain song hits you and why, can you describe that to someone? You can try. You can use a bunch of propositions. You can even try with poetry, and it maybe will touch on it, but is it ever fully there? Or maybe it does convey it and contain it, like fully or in the exact way that you do. No, man, it's just I don't know, it's so good. And so, like, that's a little part of what I wanted with that is the taste and see part as it relates to this little corner of the internet and trying to explain it to someone else. And this is something that's been perpetually hard for people in this little corner of the internet, and I don't know of an analog. I don't know of something else that is like this little corner of the internet. And trying to explain it, because everybody has experience. I heard Food Truck Emily talking about it. This is my experience really early on and continually, and I don't even try anymore, honestly, to get people into it locally or family or anything else, because it's just not for them, or people don't get it. Like, if you try to describe to people, because that's what I mean by this whole question is like, what is it about? Inherently, I think that question is ideological. They're like, give me a name, a topic, an idea, an abstraction about what this little corner is about. And that's not what this little corner is about. Like, even with Peugeot, you could say the symbolic world. Well, it's about symbolism and symbolic understandings of things. And, there's all these topics that you could talk about. Or Jordan Peterson, you could talk about like revivifying the dead father and saving Western civilization, or saving the world or something like that. Is this little corner about any of that stuff? No. What's the little corner about? I don't know. I think the little corner is about knowing and being known. That's what I think it's about. And like, I'm sure T-Grog, I know you're here and you can come in and talk about all this. I mean, I'm playing that. Is TLC about Christian apologetics and saving someone's soul and getting T-Grog to become a Christian? No. Like, it's about Tim. Tim is part of the TLC, and I'm glad he's here, and I want him here. But this isn't a apologetics debate club. Chezi is Jewish. I'm not trying to convert Chezi into Christianity. He and I have had lots of conversations about this. Like, it's just not. PBK would say, like, it's why I'm a Calvinist, but more, it's like knowing your role, or perhaps slowing your role. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. Those are New Testament ideas all the time. Sit in a lowly place when the time is right. Maybe the owner, the host of the party will elevate you to a better place, but it's not your job to elevate yourself. And that's a lot of the thing with ideology. It's just like, I wish people would just listen to me and all my ideas that are right. And if everybody would just do what I say, the world would be a better place. No, that's utopianism, and that's the no place, or the exclusivist religion of the right side of history. And I think TLC is fundamentally not that. So, okay, I'm gonna send out the invite. After I cough loudly and snort, and I'm gonna go back and look at comments. Feel free to come on in, you lovely, lovely folks. Yeah. Is this one of the verses of don't sit at the front place? Don't elevate yourself. Let's go back and see what's being said. T. Grogan, I'm hooked on a feeling. Mandy, when you think about love, it's just an arbitrary as a concept as God. Yeah, from that kind of rationalist perspective, that makes me think of that line from Good Will Hunting, where he's just like, starting to date the Minnie Driver character or whatever, the first time they're talking. And she's like, maybe they're talking about like getting coffee sometime. And Will says, yeah, or we just eat some caramels. She's like, what? And he's like, well, if you think about it, it's arbitrary as drinking coffee, which it's not. Like, that's a smart, dumb line from someone like Will Hunting. And this is the whole thing. He doesn't really understand. Like, this is the point when, actually, I just realized this. This is the point when, he comes in and tears Robin Williams' character apart because he sees his picture and he's read all his books. He's read all these other people's books. He can psychoanalyze and understand psychology. And he tears him apart by he sees, he's just some scared sailor out on the sea. And like, he's going to be torn apart. He's going to die. And his wife died. This like rips him apart by analyzing his painting. And then Robin Williams comes back the next day and it's that scene on the bench where they're sitting on the park. And he says, I stayed up really late, got a little drunk. I was torn up by all this. And then I realized you're just a kid. You don't know shit. because you haven't been initiated. You don't understand what you think you understand. For all of your knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. If anyone thinks he knows, he does not yet know as he ought to know. That movie, that scene is 1 Corinthians 8. You don't know. You don't get it. And it's not arbitrary. Drinking coffee isn't arbitrary. Everything is relative, but not arbitrary. Jedediah Pascal. All right. Love is more real than death. Mandy. Evidence. Evidentialism. My least favorite part of apologetics. And evidentialism is essentially rooted in logical positivism, I think, and foundationalism. Evidence, but this is what evidentialists don't understand, is evidence is in the eye of the beholder. We should have learned this during what I maybe am ill with right now. The past few years that shall not be named. Which evidence? Which studies? Whose? How are those studies approved? By whom? Expert witness fallacy. These studies. No, those studies. No, and then there's that great, we could play that too. I mean, it's a separate topic a little bit, but what's his name? Jordan Hall had a great tweet from that. It was one of the things he said, it was the most important thing and I don't know, I'd maybe quibble about that Eric Weinstein said in that second Terrence Howard conversation. Should we go find it? If nobody else shows up, I could go find that. It's on old X. I don't go on X very much. Do I even have X logged in on this thing? I do. There it is. There was Jordan Hall had posted it. Where is it? I find this because this is when this was a fun moment too. Oh, come on, Jordan. Mostly not working. You have these tweet threads that are just unbelievable. But I thought I was going to find it by clicking on yours, but I'm not. This is terrible podcasting. YouTubing, live streaming. Dang it. That didn't work. All right, whatever. I'll keep going through comments. I could go back and find it, but it was really good. It was essentially what it was Weinstein talking about the origins of peer-reviewed journals and how that all worked. And it's very fascinating, it's very fascinating if you're into that kind of stuff. Anyhow, evidentialism is not my jam. Colt, just join. Just drink the Kool-Aid, T-Grog. Love is eternal, unlike death. Hezmaster. Oh, I love this background. Jer, what up? Welcome.
How are you doing? Hey, how's it going?
Well, physically and health-wise, I've been better, but I'm good. I enjoy doing this. It's a fun time. Like to see you guys. You came in, broke the seal. The Hez Stir is here.
Hello, Hezzy, as well.
Hey,
but before
Jeremiah.
My first time meeting you, Hezzy. Can I just say, and then end it on that. So you two guys, when I was talking on Chad's stream this morning, both put on comments, which were just a kind of thumbs up, good for you, kid, type, good for you. And that was very encouraging and welcome. And that's a spirit, right? There's some type of thing there, right? Nobody had to do that, right? There's a welcomeness to that. And if it were to drift onto the topic we were talking about, Chad, on Chad's live stream, I wonder, would the same sense of welcome be in all places, right? Because that's meaningful, because when I spoke to Mark last night, I commented that although I had never met them, I felt very willing to struggle in front of them, to try to to try to find that, both to express myself, to try to get something out from me, to try to find that spirit of communication. So I thought that was quite neat, and I just wanted to flag that because I think that that's something special.
That's very. I also think that's like the juxtaposition. I'm not throwing any shade right now. I'm not trying to throw any shade about the other stream Mark was showing, but I would presume you felt comfortable to be vulnerable and expose yourself is because you felt that you weren't being judged. And by that doesn't mean someone's not judging the words you're saying and then going to give them their opinion. But we like Luke says all the time, because it's about the persons. And you can see this clip that PVK does that Mark mentioned, where PVK is clearly talking about something, right? He's put his time aside to talk about the stream. And then he saw Grizz comment. He stops, brings Grizz on, and starts talking to Grizz. And you could be like, well, isn't that disrupting your whole presentation? But the answer is no. This is the presentation ultimately. Ultimately, it's the conversation between me and Grizz and the conversations we're having right now. And if I could see you for who you are, so I've peeled off all these layers, like Luke said right now. I don't look at Luke right now as Christian necessarily. I understand that he's Christian, and I understand that I'm a Jew. However, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at, because also we're both believing people, I'm looking at the God in him. And once I'm doing that, and I know that there's a God in me as well, then we're basically connected at that point. And then why would I not feel vulnerable? Why would I not be open with myself and express myself? However, if you start a stream when someone starts saying, don't say that word, right? So it's going to be very different and very defensive. So I think you're definitely feeling that, and it's just stressing what Luke, with his great wisdom, shares with us constantly, which is it's about the people.
Yeah, the one thing I would say quickly to that too is I love this line when you said this, willing to struggle in front of them, really popped to me, Jared, because that's so key. And I mean, think of it like, don't make these things more complicated than they need to be. And this isn't to impose. I'm not saying like I'm the parent, other people are the children, but like even in a parent-child relationship, and we all know this too, like you learn through making mistakes. You don't even have to think about it as parent and children, learning anything. Like life coaches and podcast gurus will say this kind of thing. Most of what you learn, like what is it, the Edison, the light bulb, like he got it wrong how many times? Like what's the saying that people say, like 999 times or something, and then he got it right the one time, but he had to do the 999. So if you judge and you critique, and there's this hyper masculine space that is constantly looking for difference in judgments, people will be scared to say anything, and no one will grow and learn and evolve. And people can sit back in their, self-righteous rightness. For who wins? Them? No one wins. Everyone loses with that.
Yeah, I shared a space with somebody who I won't mention during the COVID period, right, in a free-flowing discussion, and I felt that I felt almost like they were the big beasts, right? There's the top dog. There's the tier 1 members of the corner, right? And Division 1. And if you struggle hard enough, maybe you can make it to Division 1. But hey, it's tough at the top, and you'll get knocked out. But that's not right? Because as somebody kind of highlighted once, the old Russian lady in an Orthodox church, right? She's grounded in a way that maybe many people aren't. She's living and breathing it and feeling it, right?
Yes.
And maybe she couldn't write. Maybe she could write 10 books in it. Maybe she could write no book in it, right? But that doesn't mean an awful lot, right?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
And Neil, sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, no, Neil. I was gonna just invite Neil into the chat, because who knows how late it is where you are, you beautiful man.
Yeah, I'm on the other side of the world, dark side of the moon. And I'm in South Korea right now, Hezi and Luke.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, finally readjusted to time zone changes, but gonna go to bed soon. But
how long
sorry,
are you
10 days here, then 10 days in Japan. So we haven't done a big family vacation like this in 5 years. And actually, this will be the longest family vacation we've done ever. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Wow, I'm very excited for you, and specifically there, which like it's a completely different world culture from like back at home. So the kids are really getting like a culture shock in the best way possible, I guess, right? Really, really seeing what's out there, how beautiful God's tapestry is.
Yes, although I am both. There's both a positive and a negative connotation to how surprised I am about how Anglicanized or how like English is understood here. You know, the basics of English. Like I haven't had to struggle through any Korean whatsoever to make simple things. Now don't get me wrong, it's respected and appreciated if I could use, simple greetings and thank you and you're welcome, all the fun stuff. But yeah, I mean, the way we cross streets, the way we pay for things, the way we, the general customs of the world are all the same now. You know what I mean? That wasn't the case 100, 200 years ago. Yeah.
Liberalism, man.
So there's the positive side of it that I can go anywhere. But the negative side of it is anywhere I go, everyone's head is buried in their smartphone.
Have you been to Japan yet, Neil?
No, we're going to Japan in
Japan's
8
next.
days.
Okay, I think you might find the Anglosphere. You won't have as many people to talk to in Japan. That was my impression.
Yeah, I could see that. But I'm not even talking about the language so much as the way people conduct themselves and what's expected. And like, there's a baseball game on the TV, a Korean baseball game when we go to dinner. And, it's the whole playing field has been flattened.
Luke, this is something that you and I were talking about a little yesterday, where I mentioned how, everyone has like the analogy of the flower shop. Everyone has their flower, and like everyone could find like an English letter now on their body somewhere, whether it's their tag or their shoes or something. Like, even America has colonized the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And connecting to our conversation here, which is what I think we're trying to do in the TLC is someone would come in, whether you're coming from, South Korea or Japan, one would feel very comfortable off the bat, because it wouldn't be, you need to say X, you need to do Y. It's as long as you're open and you're coming as yourself, then very quickly you'll feel comfortable, because you're going to see that no one is making you feel uncomfortable. There's no demand for this word or that word, which again, I'm not trying to harp on that, but I'm just thinking again of Alan, funny little Alan jumping onto this stream. Like, here, Mark and Eric, who are these two cool people? And so hearing "don't say that word" is very different than like, someone coming into this TLC and being told, like I'm saying, like if you walked into China right now or Japan and you start using your language and someone stops you and says like, well, you can't do that, you're going to feel very uncomfortable very quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a I don't know. I was thinking as you were saying that Neil could just start trying to speak, since they won't let you there and everyone's so accommodating to the Anglosphere. How about you just speak some Korean to us and we'll try to have some dialogue.
I know almost nothing. 안녕하세요. That's that's hello, basically. That's all.
That's wrong and offensive. So please.
No, actually, right now. So we went to dinner at this Korean barbecue place, and right next to us are sitting 5 or 6 Russians. I assume they're Russian. Maybe they're Ukrainian. Do they speak Russian in Ukraine? But I speak more Russian than I do Korean, so I knew that they're хорошо. Yeah, I wanted to say пока, до свидания.
Wait, хорошо? That's in Russian.
Хорошо means okay in Russian. Yes.
Right. We have a lot of those here.
But it's just interesting that like we're technically at war with these people. They're sitting, but not really, right? And they're sitting at the table next to us. Very strange. So, it reminded me of actually, it didn't remind me of this, but now it does. But it's like World War One, Christmas time. You ever hear the story of World War One? They're in the trenches, Christmas time, and there's just Christmas carols, and they actually leave the trenches and exchange gifts across the line, across no man's land. And then their superiors get really ticked off that there's this like temporary ceasefire at Christmas time, and they insist on, okay, we're not doing this again. Like, we're at war, and they're back to war the next week or the next day or whatever it is. But I'm pretty sure that's factual. Someone can fact check me on that. But
I've heard that too, and that's by the way, that is very much what Luke was mentioning, which is like it's the people who met. It's the bodies that we're trying to then cramp down that are very defined, like these generals we're like, no, we're in war. And this is, I mentioned this in the past, as Solomon tells us, like there's a time for war and there's a time for peace. And like we sort of look at these things as there's each one has its moment. However, during this many months ago at the beginning of the war, I saw this video of this soldier, this officer that was participating from Gaza in his son's circumcision, like over the phone. And that was a time of joy and a time of war happening at the same time, right? And we also have to realize how these things can be happening to us at the same time, multiple things and different layers of analysis and interpretation of how we are experiencing these things. But the fact that those people realize, like, this is crazy that we're fighting right now on Christmas, so like let's get up and meet each other, right? That was the spark of peace right there, potentially. But humans and generals and other institutions that have other interests in mind, obviously, cramp down on us. So this goes back to also when Jacob Federecci, our Jacob, was very adamant about Paul taking the lead, right? Or Paul being in charge, or Paul giving it structure. I think that's a mistake. It's if you let it, because it doesn't have a name, and because and to Father Eric's point about like there's no corners to this corner, right? Where is the edge? Because there's no edge, I believe that's what makes Jer over here feel comfortable. Because there wasn't a defined there at no point did he feel I'm gonna find myself stuck in a corner, so to speak, or hit a wall, right? There wasn't there. And that's because it's loosely defined. So I go back to the TLC is the right name.
So it's kind of funny. This Phlebas said, Phlebas said somewhere else in some comment that like he said Luke hates ideologues, and I'm like, Phlebas, you haven't been listening to me. I don't like ideology. I don't like being ideological, adverbial. I love ideologues. So Christmas with Mark and Eric, yeah, absolutely. Eric's been in my house. I've met Mark. I've hung out with Mark. I would continue to hang out with both of them. It's kind of like, I love what I was thinking of earlier with your Christmas wartime analogy was two things. Like I heard Rogan say recently, there's some famous war, because he was using the illustration to talk about wolves. Rogan loves wolves and bears. And he was just saying, and he has this recurrent dream about wolves all the time, which is fascinating. Makes me want to psychoanalyze him. But he was saying the wolves were so bad in one of these major wars in Europe, I think. Maybe it might have been World War I, where they stopped fighting because the wolves were killing so many people that they stopped fighting and then together started killing a bunch of wolves so that they could then resume fighting. And it's just like, there's this Peter Rollins turned me on to this. There's an Irish comedian named Dylan Moran, and he has this little line. He's funny, but he will drop little like gems in there, which a lot of good comedians will, of war is the inability to have conflict. And that's what I truly think. It's just like conflict. And if you have the belief that error, again, Thomas Edison, making mistakes and not judging you, this is psychoanalysis too, is what actually is part of your becoming, and it's a gift, not a curse. It's built in, then it's fine. Then you constantly have conflict, and conflict isn't a problem. If you must insist on war and divisions, then I guess that's on you. May it, I'm gonna try, whatever. And maybe this is an empty platitude. We'll see. I guess push me far enough. Will I wage war with someone? I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I'm deluding myself.
What if John Vervaeke didn't come with the same approach that he normally does, right? Of like, I'm going to very, very carefully listen to you, and I'm going to try to understand. I'm gonna man up your. I'm gonna steel man your argument to
Right.
discuss with you. What happens if John Vervaeke came with all his words, right, and he kept on going. But what you're actually talking about is what I define as such, right? He could spend like 24/7 in a quasi-conflict mode with everybody, right? But he chooses not to do so because he sees that setting those terms should be a pathway or a language translation tool rather than a dictionary.
That connects with like his Silk Road analogy, but
I think built into that is some assumptions. Maybe that's what you were going to say, Hezi.
yeah, but go ahead, run with it.
Yeah, like the anglicizing of the world. The United States was in South Korea, defending South Korea in the 1950s. I think it was 6 years of the Korean War. So it's a significant period of time where, and obviously being the one to defeat Japan and give Korea their country back, for lack of a better term. All those countries that have had that anglicized footprint, and I'm not even saying anglicized necessarily, like Western footprint, they have a common set of built-in principles or built-in assumptions on how people are treated regardless of their background. And I think, built into the Dialogos framework is assumptions on that. But yeah.
I want to respond for a second to something that Tigro wrote over here on the comments. But first off, Tigro, I hope you're doing well. I hope the family's doing well as well. Second, he mentions over here, I agree with Paul. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I set aside childish ways. So I'm just speaking out of my context and my religion. We say at the age of 5, you read the Bible, right? And as you get older, there are other layers of interpretation, right? So I'm not going to read the Bible now the way I read it like I was a 5-year-old. Each one has a different level of analysis. So if Tigran is looking at it like I read it once, I have my Sunday school understanding, and now that is what I'm fighting against, then you're going to be fighting for a very long time. If you decide to look at these things and these things mature as you mature, right? And you could dig deeper and understand more, and which is, I would argue, is what you're seeing over here. No one looks at John Vervaeke as a guru. They look at someone as John Vervaeke as someone that is someone who is speaking a language, who is shining a light or giving a new jargon for terms that we've had that we didn't fully understand or we weren't fully coherent to us. And it allows us to take biblical texts, religious texts, ancient texts, and then reframe them and look at them in today's world. And Nachmanides did that 900 years ago when he talks about archetypes. And then again, Jung brings that up again. And then Jordan Peterson brings that up again. And slowly but surely, we get to use these terms and understand these terms in a much deeper level. So I would recommend Tigrog, remove the child self. That I don't mean remove the child in you. You should keep on being youthful and young, but remove that version of how you're looking at the world. And this is a space where you don't have to take what everyone's selling over here, but you're at the very least seeing that topics that were discussed in the past can be reinterpreted and rediscussed in a much more mature manner. You guys can tell me if I'm misreading what he's writing over here, but like to me, this is
well, and this is, I don't know. So what I would want to add to that is, and to riff on it, is to this Phlebas comment where he says, I just find streams against ideologues and TLC's ideology ironic. So this is MJ, who's a constant blessing in my side in the comments on my corner, is he's always criticizing, and it's great. I love him for it. PVK is often talking about, he likes criticisms and comments. But here's the question is like, can you be critical? Can you disagree without being divisive? This is that verse in 1 Corinthians 11, I think 17, 18, that I love to talk about, when St. Paul is talking about communion and people coming together. And he says, I hear that there's two different Greek words. He says, like, I hear that distinctions or divisions exist among you. And of course that must be true so that you can apprehend, you can understand who's approved, who's right. There has to be people with different perspectives, but there ought not to be schisms among you. Like, these things should not divide you. And MJ kept saying, like, he had a comment and I replied to him. Neil, I think you replied to him too, where he was saying, I don't think it's possible to not be ideological. And so here we go. I fundamentally disagree with that. I don't think that's true. I think that is wrong. I think you can not be ideological. And I can speak against being ideological and not be against ideologues. That's because I'm for the persons, not the spirit that the person is manifesting.
I'm okay conceding the point, Luke, that everyone is ideological potentially. I'm okay with that point, but I would say that if everyone sees the world through an ideology, then some ideologies are better than others. And you could measure that scientifically through a myriad of ways. You could, that's what life is all about. You have to measure what your life is going to be about in the human heart per se. So what came to mind as Hezi was talking was childlike, not childish. And that means receptive. I think the best way to help T-Grog potentially see what we're seeing, and Chad has helped me with this immensely because I've really delved into the AA literature, and AA beat it. Like, everything that we think we're finding out in TLC, AA beat us 80 years to the punch. I hate to tell you guys, like, they figured this out 80 years ago. The difference is that with AA, they figured it out faster because of it essential. Like, it was essential for people to stay alive. Whereas us, we're okay kind of, meandering through life without a greater purpose, or most of us are. And but with AA, it's like, no. If I don't do this, I'm dead. But I would be curious to know what T. Grogan would say to an intervention that's 50% effective. So scientifically speaking, AA is 50% effective, which is actually unparalleled in any sort of medical intervention, especially when it's something as and where what is required is the person submits themselves to a non-thing. They submit themselves to a thing that doesn't exist, and then they have 50% cure rate, or you could call it, if you don't want to call it cure rate, you can call it a successful treatment that allows the person to return to their regular life, and they submit themselves to a non-thing. Now, you could say maybe it's the placebo effect, but the placebo effect is not 50% effective. The placebo effect is maybe 10 or 20% if I believe that this is actually going to work. So what's the scientific explanation for a 50% success rate? Now, maybe it's the fellowship that comes with, the support group of people also having similar experiences. Maybe it's just a matter of becoming more humble, generally speaking. It doesn't matter what you humble yourself to, but you humble yourself. Maybe, this is God being sneaky that I was talking about, that Jacob doesn't like the idea of a sneaky God. I love the idea of a sneaky God because I think God is a storyteller at base. I think God is a storyteller way, way before God is a creator of a setting. Like, God is way more Shakespeare, before, like, all the world's a stage. What God cares about is the players. Like, if God makes, how many stars there are? Like 10 trillion or something. 13.8 trillion years that the universe has been around. No, sorry, 13.8 billion years. Doesn't matter. Like, the setting is secondary. It's absolutely secondary. The person, consciousness, whatever consciousness is.
Neil, how can we know any of these things? How can we know how many stars there are, or how old the Earth is? There's never been controlled studies on any of it. We can't know anything unless there's been a controlled study. That's peer
the
reviewed.
beautiful, yeah, that's the beautiful, lovely story that we find ourselves in. We could say, okay, nothing is real unless I can empirically verify it with cold, hard facts. Or I'm in a story of the ultimate storyteller, and the storyteller loves all of us, but the storyteller has our back, and then it becomes this this interesting adventure. Like, okay, what's gonna happen? And then, yeah. So T. Greg in the comments, he's like, okay, so why do we have smallpox, malaria, mosquitoes, all this stuff? Da, 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 da. I sort of gave a smart ass remark, but I meant it. And that smart ass remark was, seems like an awful lot of opportunities to be heroic. All the shit that God gives us. There's an awful lot of opportunities for us to be heroic.
Would we have heroes without all
that's
that?
a hell of an answer, because I honestly don't want to get malaria. I don't want to get my leg blown off from a shell in some war. Like, I don't. But like, what I believe is that God primarily is a storyteller, first and foremost. And that's it. And do you trust the storyteller? Do you trust the story that you're in? Because if you don't trust the story you're in, you might as well leave the story. You know, we have ample opportunities to leave the story. We have 20-story buildings. We have firearms that are available for purchase. We have many opportunities to leave the story if we think it's a bad story. Sorry,
no, you're good. And so to this point, Waxkin has been going back and forth in the comments, and he said this: it's easy for us to say these things when we aren't the ones that suffer these things. I completely agree with you. And this is what I was going to say about both self-identity and atheism and theism, or believing and unbelieving people. That's exactly right. It's really easy to say these things. I would say all of this is, well, not all of it, but a huge percentage of all of this. I believe this. I believe that. We have evidence for this. You should believe this. Most of that is egoic. From every side, most of it is egoic. And this is why I think death is a gift. And that's kind of to the AA point. Because when you are suffering these things, and when you are going to die, and it comes down to like that real, that's what you really believe about things. Like, where are you going to go when you're right there? And that's the gift, is because it shows you who you are, not who you are.
But the question that Waxican is posing is irrelevant. Because, and the reason it's irrelevant is because it's not up to us whether we suffer these things or not.
Mm-hmm.
All that's up to
Agreed.
us is, what do we do with the role that we are dealt in the story? How are you going to, what is your part in this story? You don't have control over the story. You don't have control over it. The only thing you get to do, maybe, is have some choice in the part you play in the story.
Yeah.
It seems consistent with the idea that the material, or this existence, is not the highest point of achievement, right? Because if it were, then such things as smallpox would be terribly damaging. But smallpox and all these things are painful in this reality, right? So, but if there is an alternate beyond, then it's not inconsistent that, you know, there would be challenges, there would be things to bear, you know. And as somebody said before, look what he did with his son, right? You know, it's not it's, you know, crucified him, right? It's not exactly an easy path, even for the highest, as soon as it comes down to the ground, right?
I would I think where I want, how I want to go about this. My experience, I'm responding to T-Grog right now. And Maimonides talks about this in the Guide of the Perplexed a little, just with regards to, you know, that tension of the objective world, science, controlled studies, and obviously our divine, our theological beliefs. But in our stories and the books we read about these people called the Israelites. So I don't know. I think it's quite fascinating that, like, I'm one of their descendants and I'm alive today and I'm in the land of Israel. So I'm not saying that prophecies happen. T-Grog should just ponder about that a little. Isn't it curious that these people just didn't disappear and they're still here? And in no way am I saying like I'm right and I know the way. I'm just saying, if you're looking as far as like for proof, it would be curious to me what these people are still doing over here, coming back to their land, reinstituting their language. So
Jews.
The this
Now-
is a wicked generation. They won't have the sign that they asked for.
Exactly.
I gave you the sign. The only sign you're going to have is the sign of Jonah.
So, and with regards to, okay, so another controversial statement. There's a rabbi that I really like, and he mentions you have to dig in his writings, but he talks about how ultimately the experience we're supposed to be having is eating, breathing, and sexual intercourse. Right now, this is quite scary because we have another 613 things we talk about, right? So, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's just basically it. And you could see that breathing techniques that we obviously see in the East, and the idea is around that is your life is supposed to be experienced. Now, like you just said, Neil, there are opportunities that you could take on, which from my religious perspective and even from your religious perspective, God is saying all those experiences, what we just said, breathing, eating, and lovemaking, right? The way you should experience those are through proper orientation, right? So when I'm eating, I'm making a blessing. And that's an opportunity for me to just take on this life experience. Now, I look at the secular world and I see that there's a tremendous power in a rave, right? There's something amazing going on over there. Now, as a Orthodox Jew, I'm going to say, like, well, it's not appropriate to be dancing to that kind of music or with with women or in this kind of behavior. But I'm not denying the fact that there's a true spark over there that they're tapping into. And our religions, our respective religions, offer us that experience that T. Grog so wants, right? The life experience on the ground, touching the grass. But what lens are you looking at that through? Are you looking at that through just like, oh, this is a nice flower, this is a nice thing, and that's it? Or is there a greater story around that? And obviously we can't know. And as the Maimonides says, that ultimately we're standing at that point of chaos and order, of faith, that we can't know for sure. But what provides us a better experience? If we are playing this simulation, right? What is the best version of Sims I could be? And it looks like it involves having a family, getting married, eating food, breathing properly, so you could think, so you could understand yourself better. So those to me are scientifically proven, right? That family and those structures are beneficial. And those commandments for those families and those structures, generally speaking, come from old books with people with wacky ideas.
All right. This is like back to Good Will Hunting. You know, you fucking people baffle me. You surround yourself with all these books, they're all the wrong books or all the wrong ideas. So this is what I would say, the subjectivity, objectivity thing. So like Parson said this, and then T. Grog made the comment of like, where is it? So just humans have been around for 1,000 to 2,000 K. Judaism is a blip. Okay, says the conscious being. This is why I talk about all meaning is personal, and the person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. That is meaningless. That is a meaningless statement. What you're trying to say, Grog.
And who cares about humans? The bonobos were before them.
Right. It doesn't. It's the hard problem of all perception. There's no point in you saying that if you're right.
What's the fallacy where you're comparing two things and saying it's like this? There's a name, a specific name for that fallacy where you're equating two things, just saying, oh, nothing matters because 13.8 billion years and I'm only going to live 80. You know.
Yeah, this is the whole like acting this way thing, and like what acting as if thing is, because like all that, like if you're really right, nothing matters. Nothing really matters. But the thing is you don't believe that. And we could talk about this all day, but it doesn't really matter. Which back to the whole, this is the point of personal knowing. Get out of the stupid, dumbass, smart, dumb realm of subjective, objective. It's stupid. It really is stupid. But people won't believe me. We're going to keep doing it.
I'm going to quote one of my favorite philosophers. His name is Marcus Cole, and he's on the show Babylon 5, which is one of the most underrated, best TV shows. And he says something like, I used to be worried that, he says, I used to really get angry at all the injustice of the universe, that all these, terrible things just happen to people at random and all over the place. And then I thought to myself, what if all the terrible things that happen to people happen because they're meant to happen, or that they deserve it? And then when I thought that, I said, well, now I take great comfort in the general random hostility of the universe. And then what's interesting about this character, Marcus Cole, despite his, let's say, professed atheism, throughout the series, he develops I'll call it a fierce loyalty to one of the female protagonists of the show. And it's, unrequited, let's say. And he ends up giving his life for her at the end of season 4. And so he regardless of what he says, he professes, he lives in a certain way such that he gives his life for one who does not feel the same about him. And that act, I don't want to spoil this show, man, but this show is so good. It's so good. And but it reminds me of the Brothers Karamazov, where Ivan wins all the large logical arguments, and doesn't matter. This is just talk.
What's the show again, Neil? Sorry.
Babylon 5.
Yeah,
it's a science fiction show in the 90s. It's been remastered. It's 1080p now, and is the first science fiction show to ever do a multi-season story arc. And Star Trek Deep Space Nine was airing at the same time, and before that, Star Trek had to have single or double episode story arcs, but nothing more. Because Babylon 5 was so successful, and it was on this like unknown network called like the Big Ten Network or something. But because Babylon 5 was so successful, Deep Space Nine, like midway, was like, okay, we need a story arc, and they basically did a war to try to. And don't get me wrong, I liked Deep Space Nine; it was very good. But Babylon 5, Straczynski, actually the writer of Babylon 5, another interesting case. Straczynski was raised Catholic, became a diehard atheist, and I suspect that Straczynski's Tom Holland-esque Catholicism littered throughout Babylon 5 is a contributing factor or a significant contributing factor in my conversion, in that his professed atheism was subordinated by the truth that was in his psyche, his bones, in making that show, because he poured himself into that show. And since that show, Straczynski, J. Michael Straczynski, has not made a nearly comparable show. It's because he poured his being into that show, and he didn't have anything else of comparable value to give afterwards. And it didn't matter that he's a professed atheist, because the things that are like in his psyche, like in his subconscious, you can call it whatever you want. Those things are embedded in the show. So this character of Marcus Cole that I'm talking about, I love this character, because he talks one game, but he does a completely different one, and it's like which of those games win in the end. And so like when T. Grogan is this professed atheist in the corner, he might be the first one to heaven for all we know. He might be the most virtuous motherfucker that we have ever met in our lives. So I would not put that past God, and that's God as an incredible storyteller. That's God doing his thing, and I love it.
I would just say that you mentioned that it's just words, and like T. Greg wants like a sequence of how does this work, right? How does this mysterious God talk to you? When the friends of Job are giving him advice, right? So Maimonides tells us that Eliphaz actually gave him the proper advice. It didn't matter though, because that's just not what he needed to hear at that time. What he needed was friends. He didn't need someone telling him like, well, if you carry the one, you'll notice that really it's, God's not mad at you, or it's not your fault, or it is your fault. And what God gives us is not necessarily a one-to-one mapping of the world. However, he gives us rules that if we take seriously, that they don't, as long as we're participating honestly, which is very difficult to gauge, but as long as we're participating honestly, it's a living Torah. It's something that grows and changes with him through us. But sometimes it's not, I need to give you this answer. Sometimes I just need to sit next to you and put my hand on your shoulder. And that's not a scientific thing. It's more about the persons again, how they're supposed to meet and how they're supposed to interact. And if the Torah is very wise, which I believe it is, or eternal, it can't, T. Grog said, 4,000 years is just a blip, right? Because humans have been around for 200. What about science? They got COVID wrong within like the span of like 2 weeks. So like,
Science is a flip.
so I'm looking at something that's tried and true. For me, 4,000 years is a long time track record for me to see like what they're expecting. And that's why also when Maimonides looks at Christianity and Islam, he doesn't look at them as the truth, but he says, I can't deny that these are path makers because they've been existing for all this time. And the way this is mapping out right now. So this is tried and true. So yeah, T. Grog could look at this as like these are fairy tale stories that we can't wait for science to disprove. I would say, if anything, science slowly but surely is coming to the realization that they know much less than they think they know. And when you start looking at quantum mechanics or realizing that really the Big Bang is potentially starting from something beforehand. So, we of course should be humbled. And I also don't understand why T. Grog, I'm getting a little upset right now, why T. Grog doesn't see this space as, if you have an issue with religion, wouldn't this be the place you push all your friends to? Because at least here, it's not dogmatic. There aren't cult leaders. No one's telling someone how to act. So you're at the very least hearing it spoken about in a very, very calm, open, understanding, inquisitive setting.
I mean, so the reason T. Grog's here, I will say this: the reason T. Grog's here is he's hoping to be convinced that there's something more than what he can honestly believe at the present state he is in his life. And we are, and I don't blame him for this. Like, we are the best avenue that I found for, let's say, in a reasonable way, talking and discussing the general concept of faith, and regardless of the dogmatic structures supporting that faith. And so that's why I find AA so remarkable. But in what it did, because it said, yeah. And I completely agree with everything you said, Hezi, in terms of the underpinnings of your tradition increasing and strengthening that faith and that relationship with God and your fellow man. But you got to start from somewhere. And because T. Grogan is sure that no Christian sect has it right, we're about as good as you can get without joining AA. So, because we're not even like all Christians, and our Jewish brethren tolerate us well. So,
but sorry, Jared, go ahead.
Sorry, man. So I just wanted to quickly say that. So one of the words how God is described is the ineffable, right? That which cannot be spoken of. And then in the common prayer, it's Our Father who art in heaven, right? And throughout the Torah and whatever Testament, right? It's consistently the Father, right? And who then is the Son? Who are the children? Who are the children of God? Children are infant. Where does the word infant come from? It comes from those who cannot speak, infari. So, we are those who cannot speak, trying to speak about that which cannot be spoken of. So there's a kind of a limitation on what we can push out here, right? And so in the sense that the ideologue is the person who is convinced that they have managed to be able to speak about that which cannot be spoken of in a way that really needs to be, they've got it nailed, right? And there's a type of humility within this corner where everybody goes, yeah, I don't think I have it nailed, right? I might be far down. Part of me might think I'm nearly there, but if you tell me this, I'm going to try hear you out, right? So there's that element of it, right? And
I'm pretty confident
result,
I'm not right, and I'm pretty confident Grog is not right either. I'm pretty confident we're both wrong, but think he's more confident he's wrong, I think. But I could be wrong.
I don't know. It's a litany of many questions, but many of the people here, the guy that goes to church and gets everything he needs out of church. I don't know if he's coming to TLC, but TLC are people that deconstructed nihilism. you have people over here that are professional scientists. You have people here that are engineers. It's just not like, it's like the straw man that T-Grog is fighting. And I'm saying this with love and respect. It could be that it's frustrating for him to look at this and be like, how are these people saying the things they're saying? Because they shouldn't, because they should have enough IQ points to realize that this is all gobbledygook. Yet these people are here and he is here. And I don't think T-Grog thinks like, I will convince all of them, right? I'm just going to be here until one by one, they all realize that they were wrong. And I would assume that like you're ripping on the people that are cultivating the space which allows you to rip on them. And that happens with people that look at things not scientifically, they look at things religiously, and they realize that your participation in the space is a religious act for me, because that is what's supposed to be happening over here. That's what communion looks like together. Even though you have a different opinion from me, I'm interested in that. Now you can look at that from a scientific point of view of being like, well, different minds together will sing the full picture. But assuming that this is a religious space, so the atheist, right, is not really offering a perspective that like we feel is productive, so to speak, right, for the religious person, for the believing person. However, we want T-Grog over here because, like you just said, Jer, we're not sure, so we walk around being humble, and because I'm humble, hearing what T-Grog has to say is totally fine. I'm open to that, but it seems like a very like one-way street, and I'm not even sure like what his barometer is, right?
And one of the strange things about hey Mark, one of the strange things is, right, take somebody like Thomas Aquinas, who I understand he is a doctor of the church, or is he not one of the top guys? I'm not sure if he has a specific designation, but the man who wrote a treatise so comprehensive that he set in train philosophy for centuries. And after all that careful categorization and blending with classical philosophy and religious theology, got to the end of his life and went, it's all bunk. I saw, and this is all garbage. I never wrote again. So in that sense, when we try to bring forward an argument using the frame of somebody who comes from that aspect, we could kind of go, well, you'd have to consider what Aquinas said. But at the end of the day, recall that he at the very last moment of his life, when he saw what he saw, when he experienced what he experienced, when he knew something more than he could ever have learned, he thought it was all garbage what he wrote down. So we're hamstrung in the sense that our argument is like, these are powerful arguments, but at the end of the day, we set them to nothing, because if you experience a sense of what it is that's ineffable, this is all just bollocks, right? And that's kind of hard, right? How do you get that across?
I think
Mark,
what matters is, yeah, Mark, go ahead.
I want to join Mark in, and then I want to play a Peter Rollins video just because I want to, and I can.
I was gonna stay out of this because I feel like I'm saying too much. But Hezi said something about T-Grog, made me think. Well, I mean, it's everyone's dialogue, but I ultimately felt like it comes down to fellowship. Maybe, it's like what Graham Graham objected to our use of the word community yesterday, and said he prefers fellowship, and maybe that's what's going on, what's attracting T-Grog. T-Grog will have to come and speak for himself. He's in the audience, of course, or it's a chat, and so it's like, yeah, I mean, and then did you see Chad's morning stream a little bit?
Tail end of it.
At the very beginning, he played a song that's sung a cappella by, I think it was sung by Anselman. He credited it to Anselman. Would you know about that, Neil?
I watched about 10 seconds of it. I will definitely watch it, but I decided to.
Well, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And why is Anselman here? I mean, he's coming at it from the opposite direction. But I mean, compared to Anselman's vision, we're all heathen. I mean, most of us. I mean, but yet fellowship. I mean, it just seems like, again, Anselman has to speak for himself. But yeah. Neil?
He's got it. No, he's got his reasons. And I'm sure, I think what drives Anselman is similar thing to what drives me, which is he desires more people to come to faith. And he thinks that a space like TLC is a space that is our best bet for doing that. I haven't seen anything better. So, I didn't know initially why I was called to come out of the lurk, because I was in the lurk for 2 years. I'd been doing YouTube videos on stuff unrelated for 2 years. So I wasn't hesitant to putting myself on the internet, so to speak. But I felt this need to come out of the lurk. And then I figured out one of the reasons I felt the need to come out of the lurk is exactly what you said, Mark, which is fellowship. And not only that, I said, like, I don't have any really close friends I can talk about this stuff. I want to make friends. And I went after specific people. I'm like, I like this person. I want to be friends with them. And I feel like I'm still the only jerk who's like going after specific people. Like Christian Baxter, very winsome. It's like, I want to talk to everybody. Everybody's equal. I'm like, fuck that. No, I have friends. Like, I have specific people I like the most. I don't know. I don't get me wrong. I really like most people in this space. I just know that I'm not built for an egalitarian hierarchy of people like Mr. Thompson here. I have a few favorites, and I'm not. Maybe I'll become more. What's the word? Maybe I'll become a better Christian and a better person as time goes on. And I feel like I am. And to the extent I'm able to, make more friends and help more people, that's great. But like baby steps.
I definitely get the sense that my approach, at the very least, raises the hairs on the back of your neck on more than one occasion, Neil. Which is, that's more than fair. I
would say yes, Mark, but I would say on the other hand, I have no idea how difficult it has been with type 2 bipolar. So I would say I have zero right in any way whatsoever to judge your experience and the journey that has brought you here. So that's what I will say to that.
Yeah, people that are low in neuroticism like Neil have no right to say anything.
That's about
with
right.
high
That's
neuroticism suffer.
That's about right. When Luke says, like, I would be anyone else in their shoes, yeah. Like, probably. I do think free will is true, but probably.
So the fellowship thing. So I have chitlins up now, but I want to play this Peter Rollins thing because another distinction. So to your fellowship point, Mark, and I agree with you, but that's one of the distinctions Rollins makes between communion and community. Is he says community is people. And this is what Anselman and I think Tigro want. Community is people centered around ideas, first principles. Like, what are the ideas that we can all center around? And communion is people gathered around a common lack and each other. It's where two or more are gathered. It's fellowship. It's relational. It's fundamentally relational. And I think that's a distinction Peter Rollins makes. But I want to play this video because I love it. This is probably, I haven't watched this exact clip, but the title is spot on. So it's got to be what I'm all about. And my boy Parsons was wanting me to do a live stream on a recent Rollins video, but this is his new book, essentially. I think his new book is called it's called like The Absolute Unknowing God or something. Nothing Can Save Us, which will just seem like complete gobbledygook to T-Grog, but I actually think it's correct and it's in line with philosophy and the emergence of religion and how it's properly understood. But I just want to play this and then I'll just go and listen because, Sherry, you could totally jump on also if you want, but if you want to jump on and run it, sweet, because I'm just going to leave and people can leave whenever they want after I play this clip because I love Peter Rollins and I'm trying to colonize everyone. Everyone must love Peter Rollins or they're not saved. Okay, let's I'm going to share it.
And be universalists.
Yes. Only universalism against the world. Cal, my boy Cal, I love you. Here we go.
So I'll start with another story, kind of similar thing. This is just about 3 people who all die on the same day. This mystic, this evangelical pastor, and this fundamentalist preacher from Northern Ireland called Seamus, right? So they all die and they all go to heaven. And as we know, you have to get an interview with Jesus before you get in, right? So they're all sitting in the waiting room and St. Peter comes out And he looks at the mystic first and he says, okay, you first. And he leads the mystic into this little interview room. The doors closed, the signs turned around, interview in progress. And the mystic is in there for about, 45 minutes. And then the door opens, the mystic comes out and he's smiling to himself. He's going, he says, I knew I was wrong. I knew I was wrong. And then just walks into heaven, just smiling to himself. Next is the evangelical pastor's turn. The evangelical pastor gets up, goes into the interview room, the little signs turned around, and he's in there for about 3 hours, and suddenly the door flies open and the evangelical preacher comes out and he says, how could I have been so wrong? Distraught, walks into heaven. And then finally it's Seamus, this fundamentalist preacher from Northern Ireland. He gets up, he goes into the interview room, the signs turned around, and he's in there for about 8 hours. And after 8 hours, the door flings open and Jesus comes out pulling his hair going, how could I have been so wrong? That's a story I told at the very beginning of when I started speaking about this stuff. And it's in my first book called How Not to Speak of God. And in that first book, and the first time that I told that story, I interpreted it in the way that it was intended, right? So the way you're supposed to interpret that joke is the mystic is the one who's right, okay, right? The mystic goes into the interview room, realizes epistemological humility before the absolutes. I'm always wrong, embraces that unknowing, embraces that humility, embraces a type of theopoetics, and then goes into heaven. And the joke is against the fundamentalist, right? The fundamentalist is so secure, won't budge, and then Jesus comes out and says, well, how could I have been so wrong? I'm now using this in I keep calling it my last book as if I'm going to die. If I do, that would be kind of interesting. That would be a good time to die, because it's at the very end of this last book. And I tell it again, but now I'm on the side of the fundamentalist. And we're going like, oh, it's the fundamentalist who's right. In the mystic, you have epistemological unknowing. But with the fundamentalist, you have ontological unknowing. What the fundamentalist does now, without realizing it, is so questions the absolute that the absolute realizes that they don't know what's going on. So that's the move, which I was talking about yesterday, from the unknown God to the unknowing God, or from epistemological unknowing to ontological unknowing, where the unknowing is at the very heart of being itself. This is the work of the Church of the Contradiction. The Church of the Contradiction is not about epistemological unknowing, which I kind of started with myself. It's not about saying that we have doubts. We don't know things. I mean, that's an obvious truism. I mean, you just open up YouTube and your page that you open up will have lots of videos about stuff you don't know. And then there's stuff that in principle we can know. There might be super intelligent civilizations that know things, obviously, that we don't. So that's obvious epistemological unknowing or epistemological humility. But and Kierkegaard talks about this, it's almost like we don't have the blueprint of life. God has the blueprint, but we don't. And we have to live with the fact that we don't have the blueprint. We see through a glass darkly. But the move from epistemological unknowing to ontological unknowing is to see the doubt, the complexity, and the unknowing as fundamental to reality itself. Right? There's no going past it. Like that's almost like the ultimate insight. And that's what Hegel's phenomenology of spirit can be read as. It's the movement where we're trying to overcome contradiction. We're trying to overcome our unknowing. And yet the contradiction simply deepens. And at every level, it deepens more and more and more until you realize that contradiction is at the heart of everything. And you could almost say that at every major moments of transformation in the universe, it's a deepening of contradiction from nothing to being, from being to life, from life to consciousness, from consciousness to self-consciousness. All of these, the contradiction kind of deepens.
Right. So I'm gonna go. Sherry will probably show up at some time, but where I would push, this is where I'm different than Rollins. Rollins is talking about this stuff academically and abstractly, and I think he's right in that sense. But this is my last plug for personal knowing. That's what a person is. Is the incarnation of the contradiction. The lived reality, being itself, is what the person is, which is why I think the person is the center of all ontology and being itself. And that's the way that we should know things, knowing as we are known.
Thanks, Luke. Good to see you again.
Yeah, bye.
Good to see you, Jer. Neil, Hezzy, I gotta go too. Bye.
Bye, Mark.
Guys, one of the things that jumped to my mind was, so I had dabbled a small bit in the, or you anyway, Chezzy? Sorry, that I had dabbled briefly in, in the Buddhist relays for a small bit, and they have, when they talk about their body of knowledge, they call it a tradition outside scripture, outside letters, right? That it's not capable of simply being fully captured within words, but it's relational, right? It's transmitted. And is there something like that in Judaism, Kazi? Like it can't just, or is it like, is there a better insight for that person who has a chain of understanding and transmission behind them, as opposed to somebody who might have just got a whole corpus of texts and then really imbibe them? And like, what's the relational versus simply the simple reading of it, right? Because that maybe is what Rollins is getting at, right? He thinks that it's like, no, you're just going to come up with something that you're going to get caught on the paper, but somebody can show you something, somebody can say something, somebody can throw a pebble and the pebble hits, and that's the moment when it unlocks for you, right?
So there is, first of all, fantastic question. And I would just mention that in the East, you still have the Vadas and things like that are being written around like 3,500 years ago or so. So they do have their text. However, and similar to Judaism, it was actually forbidden to write down any of the Torah up until Judah the Prince during the time of before the Talmud period. But at some point, he decided that the oral Torah needs to be written down. If you read the ancient text, you see it's the way they discuss someone studying is by repetitive. What's the word I'm looking for? I know the word in Hebrew.
Reciting.
Correct. Constant reciting these things, going over them constantly. It talks about how if someone is walking along the path, and it gives a question of like, he is studying Torah, can he stop to say how beautiful this tree is? Now, we don't have to go into that specific story. The point is that someone's walking and reciting the Torah in his head, and that was how it was. That's how it was commonly done, right? Almost no one saw a Torah scroll for the longest time. They were very, very rare. The Bible tells us how they go missing, and later on we find them. So having Torah and all the texts written down is a more modern, all relatively speaking, invention. So this was something that really developed later on. So I would say you're seeing less. Now I go back to my sources and my texts and I mention them. And the idea is now, because we've studied these texts, is to constantly be studying these texts while at the same time embodying them, right? So I could be learning a whole Talmud tractate, but at the end of the day, my whole life experience is within the framework of embodied practices. So when I wake up in the morning, or when I'm combing my hair, drinking, thinking, all these things are happening within the confines of halakha. So while we are a very text-heavy tradition now, generally speaking, and originally, it is all oral and embodied.
You know, there's a political commentator called De Maistre, and I think it was De Maistre who said that once you have to write down a constitution, it's because you're already in big trouble. And I wonder, I'm not being flippant there, but I'm just, it just jumps to my mind. I don't know whether it signifies anything, or was the writing down of the tradition a moment of trouble and challenge?
Definitely, because they realize that it's going to be forgotten because of the fact that the Israelites right now, or the Jews at the time, are dispersed. They're among other nations. It's too difficult to have these study halls, so to speak, where I know I'm going to speak to my rabbi, he's going to teach it to my son, and I'm all good right now. The Jewish people, the temple is even before the temple was destroyed, the Talmud tells us how the Shekhinah has already left. There is infighting between all these different groups. Obviously, this is also, we see this in the New Testament as well. Obviously, Jesus is pointing out these tensions as well. So at some point, they decide they have to write it down because it's not being safeguarded the right way. There's another level to that, which is you are not allowed to teach it for pay. And there too, that changes because they realize there's not enough people teaching it, so we are going to have to pay them. And then the next one after that was you can't teach Torah to women. And there too, we decided that's crazy. We can't do that. And they decided that we're going to have to teach Torah to women. And the last one, which is one I participate in right now, which is you're not allowed to teach Torah to Gentiles. And there too, we have surpassed that as well. But I believe that this is part of the living Torah that God is sharing with us, which is I've given you a code, I've given you a source code, an iOS, so to speak. Now, you, of course, need to be part of that iOS includes how would you update that iOS. Now, that obviously there's a lot of tension over there. There's drama over there, right? Is that the reform? I believe that reform has the right intention, which is we still need to develop Judaism even more now because of how the world is changing. However, that has to be done in the proper way. So their intentions are correct. The way they're doing that is problematic. And that's also a tension because right now we're stuck.
Very briefly, and then I'll stop
Because he-
talking. I don't want to hag it. But could I briefly ask, so looking at people from the 3rd and 4th century AD talking about the Bible from the Christian tradition, they had, one of them had highlighted how there's multiple ways of looking at there's literal, there's historical, there's the allegorical, right? And multiple options. And over time in the Western European tradition, we narrowed it down to the kind of like historical or almost the purely literal. Did something similar happen in Judaism, or did you manage to avoid that trap?
Well, in Orthodox Judaism, you have it's an acronym called Pardes, which means the orchard. However, some people talked about how it's Pardesius and has something to do with Christianity, and maybe Rabbi Akiva was dealing with Christianity at the time. But for all intents and purposes, there's 4 levels of interpretation of the text. There's surface level, which what I said earlier, you sort of engage in at the level of 5. Then there's allegory, there's mysticism, there's secret, there's different levels of how you're supposed to interpret the text. Now, it's supposed to be tethered back to the simple understanding in a certain sense. And I won't take you through the whole story, but there's a very interesting story how God takes Moses in a time, takes him on a time journey and takes him to the future and has him sit in Rabbi Akiva's class. And Rabbi Akiva is teaching all this Torah, and Moses is not aware of it at all. He's like, I have no idea what this guy's talking about. And he feels very weakened by this. And the class ends with the student asks Rabbi Akiva, where do we know this from? And Rabbi Akiva says, oh, we know this. This has been handed down to us from Moses from Sinai. And then Moses realizes that this person that the Talmud talks about how he would interpret the shape of the letters. Right, so this is far away from Moses already at that point, but he realizes that this innovation is coming tethered back all the way to him, and then he realizes that the orientation is proper, and that's why even if Moses, the great Moses, am not aware of this, that is okay because it still stems from my Torah. So I would say that they realize that there could be changes in these things. We have different levels of interpretation, and we spoke about this a little in the corner a month ago or two, with regards to meta-modernity and how do we integrate, let's say, biblical criticism. So I would say there are schools of thought within Orthodoxy that have played around with these ideas of looking at the text from a academic point of view, and while still maintaining a theological belief system. But that gets a little complicated.
I'm gonna hit the hay, but good seeing you, Hezi. Good meeting you, Jer. Good seeing you, Jer.
Take care.
Yeah.
Family.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Kezi, I have a question, because this has kind of been the way that I see things regarding, I don't even know how to put it, regarding what Judaism, or what even a Jew is. You want me to tell you what a Jew is? You want me to tell you what I think a Jew is? Sounds great, right? I'm thinking of it in terms of metaphor, right? And in the best possible definition of the word metaphor, like the etymological, because for me, metaphor is something that carries meaning across. Okay, that's how I see metaphor. And I've compared Saint Christopher to metaphor itself. Like he's like a mythological character of what metaphor does, right? It carries meaning across.
As Jordan Peterson says, like a hyper truth.
Yeah, and what's interesting about using Saint Christopher as a metaphor for metaphor is that he's an odd character, right? So a metaphor itself is actually kind of an odd way of doing it, like when we put together a metaphor, it doesn't necessarily point directly at something, right? It's not explicit, it's implicit. And that's what I see in what God is doing with his chosen people, right? So it's a mediatory role in which, and earlier everybody was talking about the story that we're in, right? Which is like kind of my banner thing. But God, because he is hidden and he's also ineffable, he has to carry that meaning across to us. And he does it through his chosen people. And that's why I see Judaism as incarnational, because God, the ineffable name of God, is the name of the people, right? It's his name is contained within the people, within, which is it's another metaphor, right? Like it's a metaphor on a metaphor on a metaphor. I don't know if I'm getting all like,
I think I'm getting you. I mean, the metaphor, which is quite a controversial metaphor, which you'll obviously understand. You'll see where this.
I know why it's controversial, and I'm not trying to make it. I'm not trying to do a false equivalency or anything like that. But I think. Well, I'll just say it this way. I think it's actually true. Like, I think that's what God is. I think the chosen people are that which bring meaning, the meaning of what it is God is doing, who God is. Because how can we know? We can't know, right? Anyway, I know I'm not being really thorough in the way I'm
You're being amazing, as you always are. I'm trying to respond to that on multiple levels. First of all, I think we need to discuss what chosenness is, right? So there's many interpretations, but in Hebrew, sgula also comes from the word mesugal, capable. So this might sound a little also controversial, but let's say, okay, we are aware that the Russians, right, are very cognitively capable, right? We have all these fantastic chess players, and we could look at Kenya and we could see there's fantastic runners. And I'm no way trying to belittle that's all they're doing. But my point is, we are aware that in the world that there's people that,
Yeah.
Now, the Jews don't have a specific talent, and they're chosen for their unchosenness, right? There isn't something specifically unique. And because there's not something that's specifically unique, America will America, and China will China. And everyone, if we're looking at a bouquet, everyone wants their flower. Judaism is offering a multicolored bouquet. And the only reason it could do that is because it has no color. It allows all the different nations, all the life experiences of humanity to flow through it. And
Flow
that's
through. There's the
like,
key. Yes, flow through. That's exactly what I was thinking about when you were describing this, right? Because it's a flowing through of something, which is what a metaphor does.
right. So when we talk about the Torah, the people of Israel and God are one, right? So you're starting to realize like where would someone get the idea of, let's say, Jesus and one becoming one with God. So these are concepts that obviously Judaism is aware of. Speaking about them and how one speaks about them could be, one has to tread lightly.
Yeah.
There are even interpretations that would go based on your metaphor, Sherry, which would say, like the Bible, the Talmud tells us that, again, when the temple is destroyed, right, then the Shekhinah left. You could also look at that, if I want to use that as a sample, I would say Jews killed Jesus, which is like the Jews caused the destruction of the temple, and God leaves. God is gone now. The Shekhinah has left us. If I, in a metaphor sense, and again, no one should take offense, if I am a Second Temple Jew and I am realizing or thinking that, you know, the party's over basically, so I need to come up with a new metaphor, one that has, like Jacob had 12 sons, has 12 apostles, and one, his name means redemption, like what Israel was supposed to represent, the redemption of the people. Right. So, and then we talk about the suffering servant, right? Like, is Israel the suffering servant? Is that metaphor? Would Christians say like that was version 1 of the metaphor, then version 2 of the metaphor is Jesus? I could potentially claim that that's another example of that metaphor sort of taking on shape that people are trying to play with. But yes, so when Judaism is chosen, we look at it as, and I mentioned this before, as the chimney cleaners. God has given many divine sparks to other world religions, and everyone is playing with their frequency. Judaism is offering to the world, because it is clear, right? Because we're allowing the flow, we want to make sure if we're looking at a house that we're all part of, the air needs to come up from someplace, the chimney. We are there to clean the chimney. Everyone is there to participate and have the divine relationship. We are offering at least we believe, the cleanest version of the cleanest version of that frequency. That doesn't mean the world becomes Jews, because we're not looking for the world to become Jews, because we don't want everyone to be one. We want the rose, the multicolor bouquet, and we want them to flow through us. So yes, there is some theological tweaking that needs to be done, but we are very much looking, and this goes back to the Noahide things I'm involved in. I am looking for the Christian Noahide and the Hindu Noahide and the Muslim Noahide all to be different and bring all their own cultural beauty, spice, and divine language and jargon, because that allows for the full tapestry. So that's I hope that answered your question.
One of the things, can I just briefly quickly jump in? One of the things that strikes, so a metaphor comes from metaphorein, to carry from across, or to carry across, or to carry beyond. So it's carrying over, but it's carrying over from the beyondness, right? Or the removed.
Well, I just want to say one thing and let you go on, because of the deep dive that I've done into George MacDonald. The thing that we struggle the most with is meaning in our interactions with other human beings, even with animals for that matter. So we're always struggling to get our meaning across, to make sure that the person we're talking to actually knows what we mean, because what we say is not always what we mean, right? Like this is the thing that's really interesting to me. And that's why metaphor is so important, because it's the only vehicle with which we can get our meaning across. It's the only thing in language. And so that's why I see the chosen people, and I say that freely, as a metaphor, as a living metaphor, right? That they carry across the meaning for the life of the world. But anyway, go ahead, Cher.
But no, I want to bounce off something that struck when you opened the question. But multi-generationally, right? What is it to continue to explore what is being carried across, not through one generation, right? I'm doing it in a way. While there's a type of continuity in the tradition of my people, it's different, right? Because we had the pagan gods, and then that changed through Saint Patrick, which transformed even the language we spoke, right? And how we wrote Irish changed because of our influence with the Romans. We changed all the words and spellings, all reduced down. But what happens when you struggle within your own tradition continuously, and try to, what are you carrying across after 150 generations? How far have you better embodied it in a kind of a Jungian sense, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not kind of being frivolous there, but there was something about what you were saying is kind of has a Jungian vibe. Like what happens when there's a collectiveness of wrestling with a problem for 100 generations?
Yeah. And here's the one other thing I want to add to this is that because he was saying earlier that the Jews, they're nothing, like they have no color, right? They have nothing special. Well, I would argue that they have one thing that's very special, and that is their language. Their language is actually very special. And the thing about the language is that it is designed to embody within its own alphabet meaning. Okay? But that meaning it's not explicit. And that reflects God, because neither is he. He's hidden. So all the meaning within the Hebrew language is also hidden, right? Which gives people what? An opportunity for, let's throw a Greek word in here, dialogos.
Well, that is why I know Grimm doesn't like this marketing, but like calling the TLC in a certain sense, or at least the conversations that happen, a modern day Talmud. Because in the Talmud, you have a discussion, which is, when I study the Talmud today, I'm jumping into a conversation, a live conversation, going over thousands of years that is bringing in philosophy, theology, religion, looking at other religions as well. And that is a constant dialogue and conversation. And part of it, I don't, downstream from the Talmud, eventually you have the codex that gets built up, and you have the day halacha I live today, right? So if I want to figure out what to make on what blessing to make on this banana, I don't go back to the Talmud, because that's where the discussion was happening. However, if I want to experience learning and experience dialogos, I go to the Talmud. And so I'm not going there to find an insight of the truth of what am I going to do today. I'm going there to participate in the conversation.
Yeah.
Which means that if you threw me back 2,000 years, right? Maybe my clothing, I'm going to stand out with Rabbi Akiva, but I can't sit down and learn with him these texts in Aramaic and know the context he's talking about. And that is bananas.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, okay, so now I'll just throw it in my Christian wrench and say, I think this is what Jesus is talking about when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He's talking about himself as a Jew. He's talking about the chosen people as the metaphor, the way, the thing that brings meaning across. Okay. And I know that's probably for both sides of this of this conversation, for the Christians and for the Jews, probably a very crazy thing to say, but that's how I feel about it. I think that is exactly what he's talking about, and what he's putting forth in a way that the world could understand, right?
I would also argue that, first of all, the way, the path, right? That is what halakha is. Halakha is the
I
path.
know. Yeah.
And you know, his rebuke towards the Pharisees, right? It's not unique, because in the Talmud itself, we have our own Pharisees rebuking and saying, like, you know, like even before the temple was destroyed, like I said, like that they realized that the game's over, basically. That they realized that people were focusing on these texts and not realizing the spirit of the law, right? And what it's for. So and Jesus, I would say that that posture that Jesus is bringing, he's getting that from his teachers, from his Pharisees. I mean, he was a Pharisaic Jew, right? So this is it's very, very, when he speaks, I hear a Pharisaic Jew speak when I'm hearing Jesus speak in many of the occasions. Obviously,
would you say even maybe a reformer, like someone who's trying to bring things back to the source, that's something like that? If he, you know, if he thinks that they've strayed, I'm just curious here. If he thinks that they've strayed so far from the spirit of the thing that he's trying, in a sense, to you know, say, hey, we've forgotten something here, right?
I mean, he's just reiterating, hey, Bougie, he's just reiterating what the prophets have said, right? Which is like, I don't want your sacrifices, right? After we have a whole book called Leviticus where they drill down on like the sacrifices, they're very intense about it. Ultimately, he comes and says, that's not what I really want at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's always a fear. Now I would argue, hear this out for me for a second. Jesus, lovely Jesus, is hanging out in the Galilee, hanging with his friends, doing his thing, inspired by the Bible and the story he's hearing, right? And he's like, he's in this beautiful place. And then he makes his way eventually down to Jerusalem. And then when he comes to Jerusalem, he sees like the money changers, he sees all the blood. Now, if you're not looking at the text, that's not so foreign, because part of the process is, of course, there's going to be blood at the temple because there's slaughtering going on. And of course, there's going to be money changing because some people need to bring money, and this is part of the sequence that's going on. And I think part of what Jesus is seeing, he's saying, like, I get that this is like what the halakha says, but this, to me, once I'm seeing this in person, this seems like so far from like the scripture we were talking about. Now, there's two elements over there. One element is true, which is, are we missing the mark? And then, like, what are we really doing over here? Number two is realizing that two of these also could go hand in hand. There's conceptual belief, and then there's actually what the Torah gives us, which is like how these things are supposed to play out. And sometimes it's not so comfortable for us how these things are written out, right? So if we talk about an eye for an eye, right? So our sages tell us an eye for an eye doesn't really mean an eye for an eye. The oral Torah tells us an eye for an eye means eye for a value of an eye.
Equivalence,
equivalence for an eye. And really, I'm going to give him back money. There's a problem, though, because you'd be like, then why does it just not say an eye for money? Because at that time, if you just took out my sister's eye, I'd be very offended if it said an eye for money, right? The Torah needs to speak in a language which is more definitive, with more of, let's say, the left of God, so to speak, is an eye for an eye. Then our job is to take those ideas and practice and make sure that they're actually matching up with reality and how we are performing life. So once I have that intense commandment, so I know God is taking this seriously and I should take it seriously, then I can realize, but God actually probably doesn't want me to remove someone's eye, though, from them. So I would say that that's a challenge. How do you decide to interpret, right? And this is what the rabbis are obviously trying to do, and arguably this is what Jesus is trying to do, right? How are you trying to interpret what the text is telling us and how we're supposed to participate? And I'll just add in one more thing. Famously, Paul comes and tells the Christian crew about the commandments, you know, we're done with this, basically, right? And part of the issues is like, if it's just a stumbling block, we obviously can't keep all these things, and then we're always going to be in sin and in conflict, right? Then there's this tension. People have a crazy party. He comes and tells them, like, yes, I said you don't have to keep the commandments, but that doesn't mean you guys can just go crazy. The reason in the Noahide movement, or the way the Talmud talks about it, is there's a difference between a Gentile keeping the 7 because God commanded him, and a Gentile keeping the 7 because it's the right thing to do. If you do it because it's the right thing to do, the Talmud calls you are the wise men of the Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it because God commanded you to do so, then you are the righteous of the Gentiles. And the reason is because God is interested on you taking on these commandments because you were commanded to do so, not because it just makes sense to do these things and partake in these things. So before we decide to remove them, and this is sorry. Go ahead.
I think I'm lagging a little bit. So, well, yeah, but it's also the difference between being in a personal relationship, right? You do it because God asked you to do it. Well, that means God is real to you. He's right. He's a person. Or you do it because you have to, or, you know, to me, that's just a flat, one-dimensional, materialistic view of the world, right? Or mechanistic. So, you know, even because
if you
do it,
if you do things because it makes sense,
you do it because
making sense.
It gives you.
1 second.
I'm
Sherry,
lagging, guys.
just wrap up and then Steve jump in. Yeah. So Sherry, what were you saying? You're saying it's one-dimensional. You find it being like materialistic, and
materialistic, or actually more mechanistic, because you do it so that you can get something out of it, right? You do it because
you do it for no reason.
It's the old story from Job. God, or perhaps, but maybe you do it because you're afraid something bad will happen to you if you don't. Okay. So then there's this karmic aspect to your behavior where you do it because you want good things to happen, not bad things. I think that personally, that psychologically, that underlies a lot of the reason why people do things. That's why we are superstitious and naturally ritualistic. But anyway, I'm good. I'm totally lagging here, guys.
Yeah, it's got better. It got better.
What's going on, Steve?
Hey. Oh yeah, I was saying, if you're talking about wise versus righteous for following the Sabbath, for example.
Yeah.
And what the thought that occurred to be, if you're wise, so you're following the Sabbath because it makes sense. It might stop making sense, and so you'll stop following the Sabbath. And so that's it's kind of a mistake to apply your sense to decide what's right and wrong and what the correct thing to do is, because I'm biased. I have preferences. I have passions. Like the drives to sin. And I have peer pressure. Maybe I just want to be on the right side of history. For whatever reason, I can no longer see the sense in doing what I've been commanded to do. But if my rule is to do what I've been asked to do by an authority that I've submitted to, then all those reasons I might go astray, or they're sort of irrelevant at that point. And so maybe righteousness is better than wisdom. I don't know if that's what I'm saying, but.
Well, I mean, that gets difficult, and that's a big tension I have with when I speak with Jacob Federecci over here, which is, we don't want to be making decisions based on like what makes sense for us now. However, there are times where at some point in the future, using electricity on the Sabbath will not be comparable, for example, to fire, for example. It gets deeper than that, but let's say why
flipping a switch compared
Correct.
to starting a fire. I get it for sure.
Even if I'm living in a house which is fully connected to the Neuralink, right? It's one with me, so I can control it, and in that way, I'm not actually violating the Sabbath. That gets where it's difficult, because then you at some way you want to still maintain that spirit. On the other hand, you also realize that the reality is changing around you. So that's why I said I think the reform movement in Judaism, their intentions are correct. The way they're going about it is wrong.
Well, and I wonder, Hezi, your thoughts on this. The idea that Israel, as they fail, also succeed in representing humanity. I think, Sherry, this ties back to Israel as the conduit, as the bridge. They're spoken of as a nation of priests. A priest represents God to the people,
Exactly.
but also represents the people to God. And the failure of Israel is actually perfect because that's what
Yeah.
human beings are like. So there's a part of the story which is good and beautiful, and there's a part of the
Right.
story which is tragic. And Israel fulfills both sections of it. I actually, and Hezi, please let me know your thoughts on this. I think it's essential that Israel rejects their Messiah, because that's what human beings are like. They could not be good representatives of humanity if they fully accepted their Messiah.
So
Right?
I'll dovetail it. So we know about there's the mixed multitude. They're called the Erev Rav. They're only mentioned under that name. It's only mentioned once, Erev Rav. However, there's an interpretation that says every time it says the Am, the people, it's talking about the mixed multitude, and every time it talks about Bnei Israel, the people of Israel, is talking about the old school, people of Israel that left Egypt. Now, if you look at
not including the goys, right, not included. Yeah.
If you look at that split, you'll notice that the Am, the people, are always like, Moses is great and this is awesome. Like, there's no complaints. The complaints are always coming from the people of Israel, because their attitude is, this goes back to the stiff neck, which is a feature and a bug, which is like, yeah, I don't know about this guy. And that, like, they challenge everything all the time. And that is part of wrestling with God, right? The name that Jacob himself has is wrestling with God. And when Moses comes and tells them, we're going to go to this mountain, Moses just freed them, right? He just freed them from Egypt. He's the big dog. They should trust him. He tells them, we're going to go to the mountain and God is going to give us stuff there. They're like, yeah, well, we'll do whatever God says. We know that we were supposed to be freed from Egypt. So up until that point, you're all good. From then on, we're not impressed with you at all. Now,
well, and it's fascinating too, because the people who lead the nation into rebellion is not it. Like, there's a couple of stories where it seems like foreign women are brought in, but the majority, it's like it is the leadership of Israel itself that is having issues with rebellion, not these like lower level, we let in these bad people kind of a thing.
So I'll give you the most, and if I said this, if you heard this before, I'm sorry, but where you could see this human divine connection, like a parallel you're talking about, David, and sure, you were of course alluding to this as well. So we have the first tablets. Obviously, that does not work out well, right? They get smashed, and we're always using this language of like, God, the people of Israel had a marriage with God, and they went to find sort of like a different God, right? So they're cheating on their spouse, so to speak.
So the marriage covenant gets ripped. So the contract gets ripped up. Yeah.
Now, this is happening in the same context, though, of Moses just left his wife, Zipporah, right? He's like, listen, I'm like next level divine. We can't really be having this kind of relationship. Right? And he's gone. Miriam comes out and she's like, what the hell? Like, she has an issue with this, right? She's calling him out. She's also like, I'm also a prophet, but like, this is ridiculous. Now, there's other reasons why she has issues with this, but for all intents and purposes, she calls him out. Now, the Midrash tells us that when Moses goes back to build the second tablets, to receive the second tablets, God says, okay, the first tablets were for me. And assuming you would think like, well, that's like the best. That's like the OG tablets. But the second tablets that Moses constructs, he builds them from this beautiful sapphire stone, this blue stone. And it says, the Midrash says, he takes some of that. This is also why he was very wealthy. He takes one of those stones. He fashions a ring out of it, a diamond ring. He comes down from the mountain. Before he even addresses the people of Israel with the tablets, the Midrash says like the people of Israel split, and on the other side he sees his wife, and he goes to her and gives her this wedding ring, and this is the verse we all use now when we get married. He says, this, when I give my wife a ring, I said, this ring is for you as part of the covenant, as Moses taught us, basically. And the Midrash says this is the
but
first
it's
time.
nowhere in the Torah. It's
Right.
as
Nowhere in
Moses
the
taught us in the Midrash. Yeah.
Correct. And Moses taught in the Midrash, so he gives Zipporah her ring and says, like, will you take me back? I realize I erred. But this is the same thing that's happening to the people of Israel with the second tablets, which is you would have thought that the original love was the strongest love, or the original tablets were the strongest tablets. But really, from despair, from this low level, the tablets were destroyed and he's separated. Only from there can he actually reach a new level of affection, a new level of love and engagement with his wife. So do the people of Israel reach a new level of engagement with God as well. And this is constantly what's happening. If the Greek myths tell us, listen, Perseus cannot escape his faith, right? And that's what we have in the Greek tragedies. Like, there's nothing you could do about it. The prophets are here to tell us, if you do well, you could change fate. You could change your destiny and things will go well. If you don't listen, devastation is around the corner. And that is true as all of us as humans experience in our life all the time, right? We could prepare. We could be like what's that story about the grasshopper and the ant, right? We could be the ant. We could prepare. We could realize that rain is coming. We could live with our head in the sand. And this is a constant, and David is going through this in Judges. We just see this again and again and again and again. And hopefully, I mean, you could say you're seeing it again right now in Israel in 2024. We have a very stiff neck.
Well, speaking of stiff neck, I'm wondering why do Protestants use wedding rings then? If the wedding ring is like tradition outside of the Bible.
Mm-hmm. David, you would have to answer that.
Yeah, where would that have come from?
I don't know the history of that as a tradition.
Yeah,
I can tell you why white wedding dresses, but that's the best I can do.
Yeah,
it's Queen Elizabeth is the reason why. In case
okay.
Men are not traditionally like let's say ultra Orthodox Jews will not have a wedding ring for them.
Okay.
And the reason is, and people are not going to like this, is because with the wedding ring, it doesn't have to be a ring. There needs to be something of value that I'm purchasing my wife with, basically, at that time.
So that might be the one thing in The Chosen that did not completely bastardize Judaism.
Okay.
Is there's like a marriage they're trying to cook up, and the guy was supposed to get something, like some kind of a gift.
Correct. So there's an endowment that obviously that you're committing to the wife if like you guys get divorced. Now again, like Jesus went according to the school of Shammai at the time, which was like basically almost no divorce ever. In Judaism, we ended up going according to the school of Hillel, which is more open to divorce as long as like it's done in the right way.
Yeah.
Correct. But so
look, she has to do something wrong. But that includes burning the toast.
Oh, man. Toast? What about
it specifically says if she burns your bread.
Wow. the Pop-Tarts for 5 seconds in the microwave. Yeah. It's over.
Well, a woman could leave her husband if there's no, I mean, there's different reasons, but one of them is like if there's no sexual relations, for example, she could bounce.
But that's not the same. Sorry, Kezi, this is like a small thing for me. We don't know Jesus's opinion regarding that passage on divorce. Because there's two major passages on divorce, and he's only commenting on the one where a man can divorce a woman, not when a woman can divorce a man. Right? Because there's the two.
Correct, because that comes out later through the oral Torah, and like the rabbis, right? They are exposing that, so to speak, within the text, right? So at that time. That language again, I would argue that like that was a conversation that was happening also in the study halls at that time. But if he's going off of scripture, and again, we have to realize that most Jews are not reading or don't know how to read, and many of them I have like no idea what's flying. Like we know in the story of Ezra, they have no idea what Sukkot, what the Holiday of Tabernacles is. They've never heard of it, and it's only been 70 years. They have no idea what's flying. That's why he takes these Levites. I'm a little biased, but he brings these Levites right with him to go around and actually go over and teach the Torah. And there again, David, you see this this Jungian pattern of the archetype, right? So we have this famous story where Moses goes silent, right? The chieftain of the Simeon tribe is having relations with Cosby, and Pinchas goes in and says, like, what the hell? This is nuts. We have to do something. And he goes to Moses and he asks, like, Moses, what should we do? And Moses is silent. And then Pinchas doesn't wait. He takes a lance, he stabs them both. He kills them both. And we know that that was what was supposed to happen. And there's different interpretations why Moses didn't.
And just to be clear to people, this is in the text. This is related to the Baal of Peor.
Correct.
What's it called? After the Balaam and his talking donkey, a bunch of foreign women come in, which is what I was kind of alluding to before.
Right.
But the tradition is that Moses specifically does not respond.
Correct. He doesn't respond. Now, we see the same pattern again when Ezra realizes, whoa. It looks like most of the Jews over here basically married foreign women. And he's like, I don't know what to do with this right now. What am I literally taking apart families? So he doesn't know what to answer. And the people are complaining, what are we supposed to do? Suddenly, I'm forgetting his name right now, this random dude pops out of nowhere and makes a declaration. He's like, all the men are going to bring their women to the town square. They're going to divorce them. And that's what's just going to happen. And Ezra's silent. He's just quiet about this. And in a certain sense, there's both Ezra and Moses are waiting for the answer to be emergent from the people.
Huh.
It needs to come from them to realize what they want over here. And it's also a tension because you have this interplay where we don't want the foreigner. And on the other hand, we always require the foreigner. We need to protect the foreigner. King David comes through the foreigner. The Messiah comes through the foreigner. And one last thing, David, this just reminded me about rejecting Jesus. So we are told that at least the Josephite Messiah doesn't even know who he is until it's time to be the Messiah, right? So there's a sense where like even Messiah himself in a certain way is rejecting this or is not aware of this until it's forced upon him.
Huh? Sorry, I didn't understand that.
I said that even David gave an example of like how the Israelites
there's a disconnect.
They have to reject the Messiah because of their nature.
Right. So I was saying that like even Messiah himself, if you look at the Midrash, the Messiah himself doesn't even know who he is until it's time to be Messiah. As in, there could be a guy right now.
So one of the elements. One of the elements that's really important is that very, very rarely do we have the Esther moment. And the Esther moment is where you know God is operating in this situation and using you, right? Where Mordecai says to Esther, this is the moment. This is exactly the moment that we've been preparing for and everything else, right? But there's this other element, which is you really only see someone's obedience when they feel God has abandoned them. You only truly see it when everything isn't adding up, and you must trust that God is orchestrating all those things together for good, right?
Like Hosea.
There's a specific kind of beauty when only looking back can you see how God used that time.
It seems like a lot of the Psalms are about that.
Yeah.
Well, David is dealing with his situation. I mean, like the Psalms that are related to David, not all of them are related to David, but like obviously he's running away. He's in the desert. He's fighting for his life. My father and mother have left me and God has taken me. Right. So he's looking at things in retrospect.
Yeah.
Just like God told Moses, you will never be able to see my face from the front. You're only going to see my face from the back, which means you're only going to see me in retrospect. You're only and that's why on Esther, we are told that obviously the Israelites accept the Torah at Sinai. However,
it's an interesting thing though, because I've had this in my own life where we do have experiences though where we know in the moment. So David knows in the moment with Goliath, right? When he's about to fight Goliath, he says to himself, "No, I've been through this 100 times. It's gonna go well." Right.
I've had this pattern with the bear, and I had this pattern with the lion. I can handle this as long as my faith is oriented. And you obviously see this. I've masterfully planned. Like he comes with a stick. Goliath says, like, you come with a stick like I'm a dog. Clearly that was like supposed to throw him off. So like it was all planned. My point was about Queen Esther, which is traditionally we believe the Jews accepted the Torah at Sinai. However, the Midrash says that we accepted because God said, like, the moment was so terrifying that, like, of course we're going to accept it, because, like, what other option do I have? I'm literally seeing.
If not, I'm going to drop this mountain on you if you don't accept. Yeah.
And it says the Jews only accepted the Torah again at their on their own during Esther, after they realized it's clear in this story that God was playing his hand. We could now buy in again, but from our own accord and not feeling like we are being threatened to do so. Hey, Alan. Alan, if you're going to join us, I'm just going to say, don't use the word TLC. Don't smile. Don't make jokes. Okay? Just chill. Okay?
Jeez. Yeah. I've learned my lesson, guys. You know.
It was funny to see your face.
Adults speak, you know.
Seeing Alan's face being like, oh, no. Oh, where am I now?
1 second. I'll jump back in a moment, but I gotta jump off or something. But I'll be back.
I'll comment on your comment, Hezi. His face saying, "Oh no." So like, I don't know how much you're like totally blaspheming against Christianity, like when I'm listening to you, because I don't know anything. Like really, I really don't. And maybe it's not at all, but it's just so fascinating to hear this. And the little that I have read and really watched, like crappy Christian movies about these things, that's really where most of my biblical educations come from. It's filling a whole lot of it in, and anyway, I'll be formed over the next 20 or 30 years in my faith, so I'm not too worried about it.
We're all on a journey.
Yeah.
No, and I definitely think there's a part of failure that's written into the larger story that's very, very important. And if God didn't do that, then he basically can't operate in the world.
That was like my big takeaway from like a survey of the plot of each book in the Bible. I went to a Bible study that was like that. And my takeaway was like, these guys have been screwing up the whole time. It's like every chance they get, they break the covenant or do this or do that. And it's like, so that's basically the story. And I'm like, yeah, story of my life too, But yeah, but it's like all that failure is like, that's how they realized what their problem was. Or I guess it's like the wise versus the righteous, It's like their stupid minds confuse them in their wisdom, and they start doing stupid or like self-justifying things. And Jeremiah's like, hey guys, you got to cut this out. And they're like, what are you talking about? We know better. We've constructed this whole like thing. And then I guess it was Nebuchadnezzar or one of those guys came and just like, okay, now all your base belong to us, and they're slaves and all that. And then when they decide to stop, what was it, leaning on their own wisdom or on their own understanding, and they're like, okay, let's just be righteous, then it kind of goes back to like the way it used to be, and they get their second temple and stuff like that.
And anyone acting that way, right? Cyrus is called Messiah.
Cyrus,
right?
Yeah.
So for bringing them back, right? So, like, Messiah is really used as like as king, but
yeah,
we don't listen, and we're constantly being invited to partake and listen, but we're very, very stubborn, and you could see this divide. There's a horrible story, or just dramatic story, where there's this famous divide between the kingdoms of Judah and the kingdoms of Israel. And the king of Israel at the time, Jeroboam, he's genius, he's fantastic. And see you later, Steve. And God, the Talmud tells us God speaks to Jeroboam and says, like, can we just stop with this nonsense and just repent, you, me, and the son of Jesse, as in the Messiah, will walk together in the garden. And Jeroboam asks him, who's first? And he tells him, well, the son of Jesse is first. And he's like, I'm not interested. And like just there, you see like how much ego, like where, like again, like we could have been saved, we could have been there, but we decided to transgress. And there's a few of these times where we're almost there and we mess up. Of King Hezekiah could have been the Messiah if he only realized and said thank you to God for being rescued. But instead, he decided to look at this as like, no, this is just like a political victory. And of course, this is my tension with Jacob, right? Because I look at the state of Israel as something that we need to be very thankful for, and he sees it as like an abomination. And that's a very big tension over there. The floor is yours.
Can you guys hear me, or am I still lagging?
Hear you great. We can hear you great.
Okay, I'm still lagging, but I just wanted to drop this in here. I probably won't say much because my internet sucks right at the moment, but the reason that I brought this all up, and the direction that I would like the conversation to take is not to focus in on the particulars, like on Judaism or on Christianity or on Christ or on the oral Torah or the living Torah, whatever. The reason I brought all of this up is because to me, this is more about what it is, what God is doing with humanity. It's about divine humanity, which Kezi touched on briefly, and that's one of the topics that I would like to explore more, because I think that that's a universal topic. That's something that all of us can talk about without getting bogged down in any of the details, if that makes any sense.
Let's see how this goes. I don't know how that can be a universal story, though, when in Islam we are not in the image of God, and we are it is you shall not say that God has children. So it's not just Jesus in Jewish tradition as well. Israel is God's firstborn, and so in that way we would be seen as God in this world as well. In fact, Jacob's problem with saying Jesus is divine is that how is he divine in a way that all other humans aren't? So I don't know if that is a universal story.
I think again that the universal story sorry, go ahead, Sherry.
Is Richard, are you Muslim? Because we would probably need you in this conversation, but I don't think it matters what people think, David.
I would
go on.
I would just say, Sherry, that I think both could be right. I think in our history, and I mentioned this in the past, that Judaism has three hats. It has its religious hat, which is Jacob. It has its national hat, which is Israel, and it has its universal appearance, which is Jeshurun. However, that is only something that we're playing with now, and I would say that like the majority of Orthodox Judaism is not fully even engaged with that enterprise yet, which is like, what do we look like in our universal model? Because up until now, it's been very particular. And I think as part of it being particular, you've had offshoots like Islam, you've had an offshoot like Christianity, which offers, let's say, a more global element, but it's not because we don't as Jews have something to say. And again, I know we're being more particular. However, I'm saying that our message is universal. That's just not the mode we've been on for the last 3,000 years. And our universal message has been extracted by hook or by crook through Islam or through Christianity. I would say that we as Jews have yet to formulate our own voice, our own universal voice.
Yeah.
Alan.
Right. Okay. Can you, am I not lagging now? It feels like I'm not lagging. Is that better? Okay. I'm in and out. Okay. I'll just be quiet and you guys go.
Well, I'm writing a proposal as I'm talking, so I'm like half in it.
Every time I'm on mute, it's because I'm working, so you guys don't hear me clicking away.
Okay.
So, Alan, give us some of your sweet honey Torah thoughts. They don't have to be Torah related.
So what's are we talking about the major religions all being universal or having a universal quality? Is that the name of the game?
Sherry, that's for you to clarify.
Yeah. Okay. So what yeah, this is hard for me. I'm not smart. So, it's hard for me to explain, but I believe, and I say that as believe because I take it in faith that God is doing something with his children, which is all of us. And so, and I also believe that the way that story is being relayed is through the metaphora, the conveyance of meaning through the chosen people. That I think that's why they were chosen. They were chosen to convey meaning. And I would say, as a Christian, I would say that meaning is that God is our Father and we are His children. So whether you believe that it's a universal story or not, I think is, well, kind of irrelevant if that's what God believes, right? If God believes that we are His children, if God created us all, right, which He did, then the story is a universal story. Now that doesn't mean, and here's where we always have our problems, right, with meaning. It doesn't mean that all religions are equal. And it doesn't have, and I would even go further to say that it doesn't even have anything to do with who's right or who's wrong. Because if God is hidden in the world and we are missing the mark, we're all wrong, folks.
Well,
okay, we're just tapping around in the dark, so to speak. And the only thing we can do is obey. The only thing we can do is obey God. Right. And so we have to be the human that God made us to be, and we have to do what He commands us to do. So, and I think, if we're doing that the way that Kezi talked about it earlier, we're doing that because we want to do what God wants us to do. And the only reason that would make any sense is because we believe that God is a person and He's real. Oh, now I lost my train of thought. Okay, never mind. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah. I guess along those lines, and I have to jump in a second, but and I'm reporting Hezi and David to your bosses for being in the corner while working. The corner that doesn't exist. But,
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. I was thinking about this earlier of how athletes, when you watch like highlight, like people love on YouTube watching highlights of like Mike Tyson or the greats just over and over again. But in the comments, they're always like, well, if he had done X, Y, and Z, if he had not gone to jail, or if, Mike Tyson went to jail, or if this athlete had like modern training techniques, or if it had just been changed in some way, they'd even be more perfect than what we're seeing. Like they would be like the ultimate. And you sort of like, I always think like, people just love these hypotheticals of just like, oh, if he had just done this instead of this and this. And it's like, well, that ideal that you're talking about of like the perfect boxer or the perfect athlete, that exists whether someone instantiates it or not. So it's not really, it's more of you apprehending, and the fact that the athlete attempts to become like aligned with that ideal. That's the important part rather than the outcome. And ironically, if you had a perfect athlete, let's say in track and field, and someone broke all the records and just they were so good that no one could ever come close, you'd actually stop being interested in that, because you've broken it by bringing the ideal to earth, and you realize like ultimately that's not the perfect ideal. It's actually the pursuit and the hunger for like to more and more know how to be the best athlete. That's interesting.
Well, everyone has experienced this. If you're playing music and there's one person who's really, really good, then they might actually discourage everyone from participating. They're like too close to the ideal that no one else wants to go up. Like if you want to have a good time karaoke, you need a couple people who do a bad job but are willing to do it.
Oh yeah.
So they encourage everyone to come up. If it's just the person that's like an amazing singer, no one else is going to sing.
Oh yeah. Well, that's funny that you came up with that, because I went to a summer camp where we had a lot of it was sleepaway, and there was a lot of competition and like sports playing. And if you had a kid who was like a junior champion at some sport, it sort of ruined the competition, because you just knew you would win. Like we had a kid who was like amazing at soccer, and you might as well not play the game. But having a bunch of kids who are hitting heads against each other, they all kind of suck. But even though they all kind of suck, because they all kind of suck to the same degree, it makes it incredibly exciting. Like I've watched games that I still remember. We had a basketball game where 3 people made full court shots in a 15-year-old basket. So it's like literally full court shot to put you in the lead with 5 seconds to go, full court shot to take back the lead, full court shot. And I'm like, I remember that the way I'd remember like a World Series game. But if you filmed it and if I watched it now, I'd be like, oh, these guys suck. Everyone's double dribbling. Everyone's like messing up. Like the reffing is terrible. Like you wouldn't actually, but because you're participating towards this ideal of like excellence, and everyone's sort of at a similar level, then you can actually get closer to it.
Alan, is this the problem of having biological men compete in women's sports? Is that what you're saying?
Oh my, we're getting right into it.
Alan,
we're getting controversial in the corner.
Alan, I would say that this is one of the reasons why Jethro gives Moses advice, like the Jethro protocol, when he says like you will surely fail, or in
wear
Hebrew,
yourself out.
Right, wear yourself out. We're talking about Moses over here. Why would Moses wear himself out? It's more about what you're trying to build, Moses, will not succeed if you are the end all be all and you are the only barometer basically of truth. And this is also why he doesn't go into the land in a certain sense, which is like the Israelites need to experience, like you're just saying, like how it is in camp. It can't be that Moses is always there all the time. That's not what the land is made for. The land is made for to cultivate. There's a whole experiential thing going on over there. And this is also what Moses doesn't understand, right? When he gets mad and hits the rock, that's like the last element of the humanity of Moses, right? Because he's like sort of like this, half divine figure. And there's a sense where he's not fully even relating anymore to the people, to the Israelites, which do need to experience it at their level. Right, he has to eventually shield his face, put on the veil, because like his face is radiant, And that's the best soccer kid. Like I can't be playing with Michael Jordan right now, and I can't even be engaging him with my questions because it's just not realistic. I'd also just mention one more thing about your universal attitude, Sherry. God tells Abraham, and the nations of the world, the families of the world, will be blessed through you, right? That's not specifically towards the Jews. All the nations of the world are to be blessed through Abraham. And the reason they're going to be blessed through Abraham is because God says, I see that you're going to teach your children, right? I'm not even at the result yet. I just see that you are going to embody this and pass it on. And because I see that that's what you're looking to do, not just keep it within yourself, not just be this one individual that's going to be the best, rather you're looking really to pass this on and teach us on. And that's why he's selected, right? There's a few versions beforehand. There's Enoch, there's Noah. These are all failed versions of the educator. The ultimate educator ends up being Moses, ends up being Abraham.
Yeah, and to reiterate that from a Christian perspective, in the book of Revelation, the new Jerusalem is the place. Okay, so the new what? Jerusalem is the place where all the nations go in and out. All the nations. So the story is it hasn't changed. The universal vision that God gave to the Israelites it's the same one in the book of Revelation.
I mean, another note, Balaam, the prophet, ultimately recognizes this, right? He says, like, I hope my future, his destiny is with them, right? And his vision is through a different frequency coming from the outside, right? So, but that is alluding to what you're saying is like, you could see that through, and he tells him, how great are your tents, Jacob? And it's not because they're made out of great fabric, it's just because he saw the proper orientation of the tents and realizes this is a method that makes sense. And this also relates to something Young God said in the comments. He wanted to know if there's anything God ever suggests, but he doesn't demand. So when God talks about if the Israelites want a king, that's a suggestion. That's not a demand. There's an opportunity if you'd like to take on a king, or like what I call today, if you'd like to participate through a political system, God says you could look at the nations around you that have their own wisdom. And if it looks like they got that election thing down pat, you're welcome to participate. I would say the 2024 election is not what God had in mind necessarily with Sleepy Joe, but I would say to Young, if you're asking where you saw a suggestion, that's a suggestion, and they're not demanded to do so.
I disagree. I actually think that Joe Biden is perfect.
Okay, hit me.
Well, remember that if we are constantly revealing ourselves, Joe Biden versus Donald Trump is a perfect representation of the time that we're in. It's horrifying, but it's a perfect representation.
It's a perfect representation of what?
Of the people. That is, look, yes. Okay, if you have a people who are dumb, a dumb person represents them well. If you have people who are righteous, the most righteous person is a good representation of them, right? If you are a people who are Jewish, then the most Jewish guy is the good representation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, the people elected the representation, and the representation represents the people.
Yeah, well, and so when you're reading the book of Judges, the people are terrible, and so their representatives are failures in a great way. And so, like in a way that perfectly represents what's wrong with the people. So it says of the people in Judges that they do what's right in their own eyes. And when Samson is saying why he goes after Delilah, or sorry, it's his first wife, he says, because she's right in my eyes. And then his eyes are ripped out. He is a failure, but he is a perfect representation of the people. And that's what we have.
And David,
perfect representatives.
The second he repents, you're back at it, right? Like we just said, David repents, no sin. Your power comes back like once He says, God, only this once, right? Grant me my strength this once, so I could do the right move. I realize I'm literally blind right now. So I now that I'm blind, I can actually see how far I fell. But grant me this strength one last time. And by the way, the Midrash says his hair grew longer at that point, but we're told that his hair is cut, right? So
no, that's in the text. That's not just in the Midrash. It says,
what?
but
hair grew longer?
Yes, yeah, that's in Judges, not just the Midrash. It said, but at the end of the chapter, it says, but his hair had begun to grow. This is neither here nor there. But yeah, sorry. Going back, this requires a lot of thought, because people, like, I live in Canada, and people are like, Trudeau's a terrible representative. I'm like, incorrect. He is a perfect representative of the maturity of where Canada is at politically.
Well, maybe he was. I don't know if he still is.
Yes, yeah.
That's yet to be determined.
The same thing with Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe and Donald Trump are excellent representatives. Have you ever, like, as a kid, I remember tasting like essence of mint or whatever that my mom would have to make like mint cookies or whatever. Mm-hmm. And you try it and it's horrible. It's like you're not supposed to eat the thing on its own. And that's what these people are. So, ooh, like, let's have a little taste of the essence.
That's a good metaphor.
That's too much. That's too much.
That's a good metaphor. Yeah. Yeah, also, you always need a little sugar for those things.
Yes, I think you can get drunk off of them too, because aren't they? Some of them are like, essence of almond is like in alcohol.
Yeah, the true, the pure essences. Yeah, they're in alcohol. That's why they make them in really small bottles.
I thought those were like shots. No,
you're right, David. And after his hair was cut off, it began to grow back. Right. Damn.
Obviously, Hezi, you didn't attend enough of my Judge's Bible study.
Yes, I just know that now and then my older brother catches like a stream of mine. It's always in the back of my head. And he's like, you misquoted that. And like, it's never like, hey, Hezi, that was a great idea. He's like, that's not what they say. I was like, okay, here you go. So,
yeah. Well, and I'm really happy to be having this conversation, because the Bible study is just about to go into Kings, go into 1 Samuel, and later today at 1. And these are thoughts that I've been having too. Like, are these bad representatives or are they good representatives? Like,
well, this is the whole argument that Matthias Desmet is, well, not argument, but he talks about this phenomenon in the Psychology of Totalitarianism, which I, again, highly recommend. Because, I mean, there is, we already know that the mob and the tyrant are in this reciprocal relationship with each other, right? But it's not that easy to, it's not that easy to determine what exactly is going on there. And the antidote to all of that is, in Matthias Desmet's opinion, truthful, integer speech in love. Comes from your what I would say call your soul, right? From that still small voice that speaks to you, that you give it voice. In other words, and you do that in love. That's the only thing that breaks the spell of this reciprocal relationship, that, this unhealthy, like what you're describing, relationship that we have with leadership, and they with us, because we form them, right? We actually, mob actually has more power in forming that.
I had this instance in my life where I had a couple of options as far as what direction I was going to go in. And I was praying and I was asking God what way he would reveal himself in my life. Like, what is the thing where God could be revealed? And I felt God say to me, I'll be revealed no matter what you do. So if you do this, this is how I'll be revealed. And if you go in this other direction, I'll be revealed in a different way. And I felt I was able to choose which way God would reveal himself to me.
Like Mordecai tells Esther, right? Redemption and salvation will come. Like, this could be your moment, but regardless, if it's not you, God is still going to act regardless. Like, so like I'm saying, you can be destroyed. Like, this is your moment to participate in this timeline, but you don't have to. And there's other timelines where we still come out successful. And why the Talmud also tells us that different prophets could have the same prophecy, but it comes out different. And there are different sequences of how these are happening. These are options that we can partake in. And
a friend of mine, he knew a missionary, and the missionary felt like God was calling him somewhere, and it's just like, Lord, do you really need me to do this? And he felt God respond to him, look, you're not the first one I asked. And if you say no, I'll find someone else. Like, and that was his experience. He's like, oh, okay, I'll do it.
Are you allowed to, like, okay, so in Judaism, you could rabbi shop, okay, as in I could say, I'm going to Rabbi X for dietary restrictions, and I'm going to Rabbi Y for Sabbath restrictions. And I could also know that that rabbi and that rabbi have different opinions, and I'm sort of like routing my own path. What I can't do, I can't go to my rabbi for dietary restrictions, him say, no, you can't. And then I go shop for a different rabbi that says you can. So like, I wonder, like, is there something like that just in Christianity where like you could like sort of shop for your theology?
Not to represent the whole church, but I know within the Orthodox tradition, it's one of the best parts of the Brothers Karamazov is it speaks of people who, if you pick a master, you have to do what the master says. Mm-hmm. So Alyosha is in a monastery under this guy named Zosima. That's his elder, and he must do what the elder says. There's no way of going against it. And I felt this within my own life, is I picked people that I knew would give me things in my own life that would be difficult, and I was just like, but you have to do the thing. If you pick them and say, advise me, you have to take the advice. If you're in that position as a student. That's more what I think is right, not what you have to do, though, Hezi. Because
But I would say that Orthodox Christians, they shop, like they join a certain kind of the church, or they prefer to listen to, different teachers in the church. And they also prefer not to listen to certain people in the church, like there's the, what's his name? Is it Father Peter Hears? I can never remember. There's the two brothers. One has the podcast, Orthodox Ethos, and then the other one has the other podcast. Why Are We Talking About Rabbits? One is a priest, the Orthodox Ethos, and I've been warned against him. He's an Orthodox Christian. He's a priest. So yeah, they shop. But it's interesting. I get the impression that as a general sentiment within Christianity, people are not happy with shoppers. That's why they, it's like because there's so many dogmas in the different factions of Christianity, Protestant versus Catholic versus Orthodox versus whatever, like, there's so many of them that for some of them, when you cross a line, you're no longer a Christian. Like you've left the faith. That was
what
my
it is, Jerry,
experience.
is that I was at a church that attracted a lot of people, and we would call the visitors tourists, because there was a lot of people that would visit the community for a week or for 3 weeks, and they weren't actually contributing, right? They weren't people with local businesses. They were tourists who come in for a little bit, and yeah, there's a good part of tourism, but it was just like, this is not someone to build a relationship with. It's like the church shoppers is like if you were on a date with a girl who's swiping through Tinder. That's what it kind of, it's like, do I build a
Yeah,
life?
but I think Kezzy's talking about something else. He's not talking about a place to call home. He's talking about authority to submit yourself under, right? And so like
multiple authorities, and that the other authorities are aware of that.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, personally, I would say no, that is not a thing in Christianity. Multiple authorities is not a thing in Christianity, which is why you get these echo chambery denominations, right? Because
I just to clarify, in Judaism, as long as you're still within the Orthodox realm, right? So there could be like different denominations, but they're all still considered Orthodox, right? So that's why.
Okay. So you're still within. You're still within that.
I wouldn't be able to ask a Reform rabbi and use that in an Orthodox circle. So
okay.
As long as it's a fringe Reform person, the other Reform rabbis still recognize that as within the fold.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what's happening. That's what I see happening within Orthodoxy. There's a lot of disagreement, which actually I love. Like it's not the kind of infighting that destroys the church, right? It's that it's perhaps like you say, arguing for the sake of heaven, right?
Correct.
And so that's what I see within the Orthodox Church. Whereas my experience in the denomination that I was involved in, or the denominations in the Protestant Church, if you had a differing opinion, you actually had to either come under, like forget your opinion, or you had to leave. And oftentimes people would form new churches. And so the fracturing just, goes on, right? That's my personal experience.
Just reaching out to you guys, asking. I'm thinking what to write about, what to do my video about next week, tomorrow for the weekly portion. Should I speak about the copper snake? Should I speak about Moses hitting the rock? Should I speak about why Moses wasn't the one to take them into Israel?
Oh gosh, those are all really great. Can you do them all?
Each one's like 5. I mean, like they're 5 minutes. I don't know. Maybe about the red heifer. I don't know. I'm thinking. Guys, unfortunately, and this is why I love the space. I love this, but I definitely am working like 7 times slower. So,
yeah. So Hezi, you have to go work on your stuff so that you can come back out at 1 for when we talk about Samuel. Okay.
Yeah, and I have to go too. So this is a good place to sign off. Anyways, thanks, guys.
You're ending it, Sherry, yeah?
I'm ending, yeah.
So, David, before you end it, Sherry, David, just look into, if you go to my videos last week, I spoke about the similarity between Korach and Samuel. It's quite interesting.
Ooh, fun.
We'll talk.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.